All right. We are live. Let's see. Scoot this way a little bit. Make sure I'm good and centered-ish. Hello and good evening, everyone. Hope you guys are doing well. Gonna make a few changes to the camera real quick, just because I don't like it when my face is super bright and shiny like that. Let's see. Is that better? Yeah, that's better. Not quite as... No, that's too dark. It's fine. Sure. Why not? All right. Good evening, everybody. Looks like we've got Socially Confused, Danger Hobo hanging in chat. Irate Caveman, good to see you. Thank you so much for the sub. Before we kick off the show this evening, I just want to remind everyone that my channel is 100% for charity. I take no monetization for myself. I donate everything to charity. So let's put exclamation point charity in chat. And there is the link to the donor drive. I'm always raising money for stackup.org, which is a organization that helps connect veterans and service members with video games and video game communities to help combat PTSD and the struggles of being away from family and friends. It's a cause I believe in. That's why I'm here. So I just want to let you guys know that whether you donate directly via the donor drive or you subscribe because you hate commercials and or you like the content, or you just deal with the commercials, all that monetization goes directly to stackup.org 100% and in its entirety. I actually need to make a donation. I keep on forgetting about that. So thank you so much for the support, Irate Caveman. I really appreciate it. So this evening, we are doing a lore equals gameplay, but it's a bit different. Most of the time, lore equals gameplay for me is I will do it if I'm going to review a new substantial piece of lore. Sometimes things that come out in jump points. I used to do it more often when the narrative team would put out a new article on Tuesdays, which is what they used to do usually once a month. They are real busy with doing all the narrative work for Star Citizen Squadron 42, so they haven't been doing that as much, but there is occasionally new lore in Jump Point, which actually one of them we're going to read tonight. But I figured I would do a lore equals gameplay on regeneration, because there is a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings about regeneration and how it fits into the Star Citizen universe. Most people haven't even read the original Lore Maker's Guide to Regeneration article, or either only partially or not at all. But there's a lot more besides that, and that's the impetus for this is the changes to medbed respawn, allowing for regeneration in tier 3 medbeds, and the sale of the Ursa medevac. I love the Ursa medevac. What I do not like is the implications from the commercial and some of the statements surrounding the permanence of tier 3 beds being allowed to regenerate. And I'm specifically using the word regenerate because I think that there needs to be a distinction. Yeah, I died 1,000 times. And when we get through there's a lot of lore, so this can be a little bit of a longer episode, but there's a lot of lore to get through. And there's a reason why I really don't like that, because if you've read the lore, or you've heard me talk about it or Paul talk about it, you'll know that dying 1,000 times is not a thing. There's no way, if CIG is sticking to the narrative that they've written, that dying 1,000 times in Death of a Spaceman and regen, not a thing. That's 100% not how it's been portrayed to us, both in the fiction and the design of the game. And so whether it's just really bad marketing or really campy, it's not good. It sends a really bad message, especially given the timing where it's releases only minutes away from Jared reiterating that Death of a Spaceman is still the plan. It will be a thing. It's going to get more punishing, and it's like, well, on one hand you have this, and on the other hand you have this. You need to. The timing is bad. The messaging and the timing is bad because the changes came right when they released a new ship to take advantage of the mechanic. So it's super sus. And you've got CIG employees are like, yeah, this is sus. I'm sorry. Even they don't like it. And so the timing is bad, but at the same time, if you've read this stuff or if you're at all familiar with it, you should be scratching your head like, what's the plan? What are we doing? What's going on? So we're going to read through the lore. Not going to go through all of it. But a good chunk of it. So we're going to be here for a little bit. But there is a lot. It's not just the Lore Maker's Guide to Regeneration. There's like 5 different significant mentions surrounding regen in the Lore Maker's Community Questions articles, which I've read before. There are 3 different narrative short stories that have significant, not insignificant mentions of regeneration. One of them was just posted in Jump Point in April. So there's a lot of incongruity with regen, with Death of a Spaceman, and these changes to the mechanic. And now I will say that I absolutely am 100% behind the idea of Star Citizen not being punishing right now, because I was joking about this. Who was I talking about this with? Was it when I was doing the podcast? I was doing because we were talking about this, and Naz and I did a react to it on the Pathfinders earlier this week. And we were talking about it, and I'm like, I can't remember the last time I died to combat. I think the last time I died to combat is when we were doing one of the overdrive missions. And it was simply because I got in the way of a torpedo that was meant for an NPC. It wasn't even like... and every other time I've died, it's because like the hangar doors were desync.
We just become best friends. Yep.
Hey, Blizzrad, thanks so much for joining me. Thanks so much for the sub. Paul went off last night about seeing North End. I haven't been able to watch Paul's show, but I'm gonna have to catch up on it because Paul and I generally are, because everything Paul's read, I've read, and so generally Paul and I agree on most things, but and Paul and I have disagreed about the whole tier 1 versus tier 2 respawn thing, and I'm more of a we don't need tier 2 respawn if we have revive. I don't think it's necessary because I think that they should stick with what we're going to read about in here regarding Death of a Spaceman and what regen is intended for. Yes, I got killed by a torpedo, but it wasn't even meant for me. That was the last time I got killed in combat. Paul fully read them a riot act for the day. It's bad. It is bad. It is bad marketing. It is bad messaging. It is horrible timing. And it is 100%. It just totally, says Death of a Spaceman, Regeneration. Nah, we're going to throw all that out the window. And I get if they say that, no, we're not going to do that. That's fine. But somebody needs to take that commercial down or redo it because it is not in line with what they have stated. And it's not just one thing. That's the problem. It's not just the Lore Maker's Guide to Regeneration and the original Death of a Spaceman article. They've been reiterating Death of a Spaceman for over a decade. They've been reiterating regeneration and elaborating on it for the last 3 years. Hey, Shampasto 7, good to see you, buddy. Yeah, it is predatory mark. It is 100%. I have given CIG the benefit of the doubt before when things were a little bit nebulous. Nebulous would be the word. This is not nebulous. This is crystal effing clear. This is 100%, bold-faced predatory marketing, and it is not good. It is not good. I did put Busta's face on me. I was only able to briefly log into 3.23.1 today's Saturday, so Thursday night. and I was able to get it loaded up on me. And I love it. I appreciate what she did. I love Buster. So yeah, I've got it loaded up in one. Hopefully this week I'll actually get some time to play some 323.1 because I'm eager to play it more because I got 320 quite a bit of 323 in EPTU. But I'm itching for some more Star Citizen now that the patch is live and 323.1 is live. Mistral 19K07, good to see you, buddy. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for joining me. And so yeah, it's I have been at North End Trooper. I have been playing Gray Zone Warfare, not as much as I'd like because it is fun. I am enjoying it. I've been playing with Tasteless Max and Treeson because we're in the same PMC. So I can't talk to you too much about it because you're on the wrong side of this, North End Trooper. You. If I see you, I'm gonna have to shoot you, buddy. Yeah, right. I suggested this was to sell nurses and was browbeat. No. I I want to believe CIG when they say this is not done to sell nurses, but at the same time, this is bad marketing. This is bad marketing. This is really bad timing, and like if it's a whole lot wrong with it. And I'm actually working on a video for this because I fully believe in constructive criticism. I'm not one of those people that's going to come out and say, CIG, you guys are fucking stupid, blah, blah, blah. No. I believe in, if you have a complaint, your complaint is not valid unless you offer a solution, and that solution needs to be well thought out and constructive. And I think I have, and I'm not going to pretend to be a developer or anything like that, but I've got ideas for solutions that work well with the lore, that work well with the mechanics that CIG has either already developed or is developing, that would allow for regeneration and Death of a Spaceman to be preserved, or more preserved in the way that we're going to read about, while also allowing for convenient respawn via revive rather than respawn burst via everything being regen. Because that's where I think we're missing is good revive mechanics and being able to be revived on site to do what we call in my line of work. And I'm going to show you the shirt because I'm wearing one of my favorite shirts, but this is my bag. And so my idea incorporates lore, it incorporates game mechanics CIG has already designed or are designing, it incorporates believability within Star Citizen universe, but also within real life. It is revive, and essentially treat and release or treat and transport, but via NPCs. So yeah, infinite regeneration of a spaceman. Is it old men in wheelchairs caning each other? Jesus, was rad. But before we switch to the screen and get launched into this episode, I'm going to show you the thumbnail I've created for the video, and I think this is the one I'm going to use because I'm actually pretty proud of my Photoshop skills for this. All right, we're going to switch screens, and then we're going to get into the lore. What do you guys think? Is it okay? I showed my community, so some of you guys have already seen it, but this is I think the final version of the thumbnail image I'm going to use for the video that I'm doing, because this is what I want. I want Trauma Team, and Trauma Team this is the thing.
Say we all.
Say we all. And I'm going to make a video on it, and I'll hopefully have it out within a few days, and I'll post it everywhere, and I'll get you guys to share it. And I'm going to create a post on Spectrum and, share it with you guys, and hopefully you guys will upvote it, because I think this is what we need for Respawn, for the overwhelming majority. If you get downed, this is what we need, not this. We don't need to be magicking regeneration over and over and over again. We need NPCs to come out of spawn closets and reinforcement, Cuddy Reds, and revive you on scene and treat you on scene if you want. And if you want to be transported to the closest, or not even the closest to whatever clinic or hospital you want, because you're like, oh, you know what, fuck this mission, I'm out. I'm not gonna. There's too many of them. Sweet, all right. You're down. Do you pick option A or option B? You want to be treat and release, which is they revive you and treat your symptoms and off you go, or treat and transport, and then they show up and you fade to black and you wake up in the med bed at the clinic, and they've got your tier 3 and tier 2 injuries healed, or at the hospital because you've got tier 1 injuries and you want those healed. It's up to you. If you want to go to the hospital that's back at your starting location, go to that one. They'll take you. If you want to go to the nearest clinic, do that. If you want to go to a hospital ship that's in orbit, once that becomes a thing, eventually, because John Crew will eventually make the endeavor, have it be that. But instead of regenning all the time, have revive. Because that's what the original plan, both in Death of a Spaceman as well as within Regeneration, is for regen to only be in the cases of catastrophic death, where there's no way that advanced medicine, and bioreconstructive surgery and all that could save you. Yeah. I'm curious about how a body has grown in a tier 3 bed with the size of the green goo canisters that the cabinets imply. Where does it pop out of? Yeah, it makes zero sense. But this is the thumbnail image. I think it's probably one of my best ones yet, so I had to share it with you guys because I'm excited about it. I've got a bunch of good clips and images for the video, and I'm working on the script. So hopefully I'll have the script done tomorrow and start recording it tomorrow night and be able to throw it together and have it released in a couple days. Yeah. Who is Rick James? When they say that this was the plan all along, I promise you it wasn't, because I literally, like, let's see. Here is it. I'm gonna drop the link in chat because I found the link, timestamped and everything. Here is where Richard Tyrer says that it was not. In 2021, Richard Tyrer, the guy who's number 2 behind Chris Roberts, literally told Jared in a video that it was not the plan. I'm not crazy. It's I downloaded the video just in case they take it down, because it's up. Yeah. It was not a thing. So, but anyway, this episode is about the lore, but the video is about providing constructive feedback and providing ideas for solutions that CIG could incorporate into their design. From player, I'm a player, from player feedback based off of what I want as somebody who's into medical gameplay, but also where I want to see the game going in terms of preserving the idea of Death of a Spaceman and preserving the idea of regeneration and not watering it down because people want things to be convenient. Because there should be convenient access to Trauma Team, in Stanton. Even in Pyro, there should be Trauma Team, and insert name of different corporation here. But we're going to read about lore, about these people who do exist in the Star Citizen universe. It's a thing. Like, there's so much you could go off on, but if you go to the Apollo, the original transmission for the release of the Apollo was made famous because there was a movie or TV series, I forget which it was, that was all about people like this and corporations like this going out into Caliban during the fall of Caliban when the Vanduul were invading and rescuing people. The Vanduul were invading, and we had people, private citizens, going in and rescuing people for money, and money and fame. But this is what we need. we need trauma team to pop out of a spawn closet in the bunker you're in and jab you with a med pen, and hit you with the med gun to treat your symptoms, and off you go if you're playing solo. But you want to continue with the mission. If you don't want to continue with the mission, all right, fade to black. And it's just like if trauma team, you wake up for a split second in the back of a Cuddy Red on the way to the clinic of choice, hospital of choice, and then you wake up in the med bled, and it take you lose no time. But why would we rescue anyone if it's this convenient? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, why would if regen is this convenient and I can die 1,000 times, why would you ever be rescued? And I get you don't want to wait for players to come rescue you. Yeah, but guess what? Everybody's like, oh, it takes 20, 30 minutes for a player to show up. Because we have 100-player servers, folks. When there's 1,000 people playing in Stanton, do you think it's going to take 20, 30 minutes for a player to answer your medbed beacon? When we have reputation, that says, oh, okay, I'm going to put out my beacon, and I only want people who have 4.5 stars or greater to answer my beacon. But they can also see your reputation. If people will come to your rescue. And more importantly, when we have server meshing with NPC populations and Quanta, doing all the probability volume stuff, which isn't reliant on Quanta, but Quanta is what will change the probability volumes. We have them right now, they're just static. But with server meshing, not being a thing, those volumes are very low. Think about how often you get interdicted. Okay, well, with server meshing, they can make it so that the probability volume is high enough that if you're on a bunker in Hurston and you call for trauma team because you're downed and the thing I've fallen and I can't get up, click, that they're there, and it's a countdown of 1 or 2 minutes long, and that's perfectly reasonable. That's gamified, and that's good. And they come in and they revive you. Yeah, I wish, and that's the problem, is because we are, and that's why what they're doing right now is fine, because the backspace express, is what a lot of people call it, and I think it's a great name, is perfectly fine in the alpha state of the game because we don't have these things. But in the long term, it shouldn't be backspace equals suicide. It should be backspace equals UI pops up. Do you want to be revived and treated in place, or do you want to be treated and transported? Because as long as you go down and you are that down state, you're not dead and you shouldn't die. Regen is only meant for catastrophic death. You flew too close to the star in Stanton. A torpedo, yes, I said torpedo again, errantly landed on your forehead, or it was on purpose because you're playing too close to Blizzrat. Though that's what regen was made for, folks, because they want more of this. That's what was always written. Anyway, sorry, I'm ranting, but I'm proud of my thumbnail image. So in order to give you, I used to be an adventurer like you, and then Blizzrat hit me with a size 9 torpedo in the knee. Yeah, 52 million kilometers away. Exactly. When you put out the beacon system isn't utilized because it's broken and it doesn't have enough features. Well, when you make the beacon system work and only people who are in orbit of Hurston can take your beacon, and then okay, well, do you want to wait 3 to 5 minutes for a player and have it cost you X, or do you want to wait 1 to 2 minutes for an NPC, and it'll cost you add a 0. And if you've got the time, pick a player. If you don't have the time, pick an NPC. And it's no skin off anybody's back because that player can also be taking rescue missions, rescuing NPCs. I wish I could say I was sorry. You don't lie to us, Blizzrat. It's okay. Honestly, if it was heal 1,001 times instead of respawn, then we wouldn't be talking about it. 100%, Trooper, 100%. Yeah. And that's the thing is, the player doing it, that they can fudge it because if you're paying an NPC corporation, the money just goes into Ethereum. But if you're putting the money out to a player or a player group, then that money is going back in the economy. And the other thing is, you can also put it out to say, hey, once they evolve the mechanic, you could say, not only do I want revive in place, but you could say, I want to be revived. And then, once you're revived, you could negotiate for treatment. Like say if you have you could put it out in a tier 1 injury. Put a series of check boxes. I need somebody with a tier 1 bed to come to me. I don't want to go all the way to Loreville and give the Hurstons my healthcare dollars to heal my tier 1 injury. I need someone with an Apollo to come to me. This is, I mean, I'm not going to downplay how much work this would be, but at the same time, this isn't, some horribly complex, idea and mechanic. This is, using your mobiGlass to create a beacon, and it only puts it out to certain people. And right now this isn't going to be a thing, and this isn't going to be, this wouldn't be possible until we get to really even dynamic server meshing for the player aspect of it. But for introducing the NPC function of revive, we have spawn closets right now. We have NPCs. Hold on, I downloaded it. Where'd it go? Let's see, sort by type. Here we go.
I went on it.
So if you haven't seen this already, the NPCs are reviving each other in game right now.
I went on it.
Okay.
I don't know which one I'm not.
You're gonna get off on the platform. Oh, he just revved his homie. What the fuck? They're revving each other. Ain't no
I don't think
way.
I've ever seen that. No way. An AI?
I'm recording that.
Dude, Major, are you down in the bunker?
Yeah, I'm down. I'm waiting to get revved.
Okay, I'm scared of shit.
There's
like,
3 of them right next to me. Oh, they're revving. Oh, there's 4 of them. Oh.
They're revving each other, bro.
Oh, ow!
Are y'all both dead now?
I went on it.
A, yeah, socially confused. That is cool. But B, Ninetail, the Ninetails trauma team just showed up. Why is there not an NPC faction trauma team that just will walk out of a spawn closet as if they just landed and went down the elevator and revive you? And then they go back in the elevator and boom, you're good to go. Now, yeah, there, plenty of work to balance the mechanic and everything, but we need NPCs doing this for us when this occurs in a short span of time rather than regen. You shouldn't be backspacing in this situation and waking up in a clinic or a hospital. You should be backspacing, having UI, and then you can watch them through your blurry vision, and they run up to you, clear the room, and then jab you with again a pen, and then they can hit you with the med pen to if you want for them to treat your symptoms, blah blah blah. And congratulations, that just cost you 15,000 UEC, but you continue on your way. Whatever. Yeah, trauma team would be really cool, and we're gonna read about why it basically already exists in the lore. Sorry, too many tangents, but had to show you guys that because that's gonna go in my video. Okay, so to give you an idea of how much lore there is surrounding this, I saved all the links because I cite everything. But would people play medics that they can just rely on NPC trauma teams? Think about how much they would charge if you had an NPC trauma team. Now, if you want to play solo and gear up and everything and go do the solo thing, sure. You bring your when I play solo, I run with med pens and a paramed device, 100%. And if I start getting hit, I back up. But sometimes things happen and you get downed. So If you get down and you're playing solo, all right, well, now it's going to cost you. If you had friends with you, well, they just hit you with a med pen, and med pens are cheap. But if trauma team has to, ethereally fly to you with a team, with a team of 4 people, and go down into a hostile environment and clear the room and then revive you, the cost is going to be a lot more. It's just like if right now, if I cut myself in my backyard, if I were to bandage up the wound myself, it would cost me, you know, pennies on the dollar compared to what it would cost for an ambulance to show up. And that's just an example. But that's the thing, is if a corporation is providing a service and they have to put forth all this infrastructure and everything to do so, then it's going to cost a lot of money. If you do it yourself, it's going to be cheaper. The same thing applies if you do your own engineering maintenance on your ship. If you want to play solo and you don't want to do your own engineering and do your maintenance on your ship, you can do it at the station and pay for the NPCs to do it, and it's just going to cost you more. NPC trauma team would be much more expensive, and think about how it would scale. Trauma team in Stanton, not too expensive, not that bad. Trauma team in Pyro, more expensive. Trauma team in Null, way more expensive, but still make it available. Because that's the other thing, is there are, here in any modern country, there are paramedics on ambulances who will come to you and help you out within minutes in any, sufficiently modernized country. So basically almost every UEE settled system. But even in the far-flung parts of the world here and backwater countries, there are what we call non-governmental organizations that provide medical aid. And there are private corporations, private for-profit corporations that do this. I've worked with them. I've trained some of them to go and do this work. And it costs a fortune. And if you don't have their insurance, it's a $75,000 bill to get airlifted off of Everest when you fall and break your leg. But there's a corporation that does it, because they know they're going to make a fuck ton of money off all those rich people doing that stupid shit. And there's corporations that do it to support the UN, and governmental organizations. There's, they provide the support to everybody, but it costs a lot of money. And the people that do it get paid a lot of money. If I were single and didn't have kids, that's what I'd be doing, because it pays a fuck ton of money. And that's the thing, is that's where this needs to go. And that's what the lore suggests, that all this is a thing. But that's why the other reason, the marketing and the PR and the timing of the commercial is just so bad and so sus. But B, is it contradicts all of this. And it contradicts everything that we're talking about. Yeah, Flight for Life ride costs $700K in Denver. Probably $70K. But yeah, if you don't, and your insurance will pay a large portion of that, but you'll still get stuck with a big old bill. And if they don't cover it, then you're really boned. But yeah. So I'm going to scroll down and show you everything, because most of the people only know about this link, the Lore Maker's Guide to Regeneration, that was originally posted. Well, then there was the Star Citizen Live, where the narrative team, Dave Haddock and Will Weisbaum, I think is how it's, Will Weiser, I think, came on for an hour and elaborated on regeneration. And of course, I'm sure nobody watched that but me. But then regen is, and along with it, a lot of medical stuff is largely mentioned 5 times in Lore Maker's community questions. And then it also comes up in a lore article, Far From Home, old Jagger, and he talks about regen. So we're going to read about that. Also because he's talking about it with someone in one of my favorite in fiction or in Star Citizen locations. They talk about it in Star Watch, basically, and what these things are doing is they are incorporating regen into the lore of the universe in order to answer some questions about regen. In Crossroads, which was that really cool bounty hunter lore from Jeremy Malul, his first narrative article that he put out, they talked about regen. And even in the latest Jump Point, they mentioned regen. And so we're going to look at all of these things. But before we do, we're going to provide a little bit of context. We're going to look at Death of a Spaceman. We're not going to read the whole thing because it's long. If you haven't already read it, please take the time on your lunch break or when you're sitting there drinking your coffee in the morning or having a cocktail in the evening, read Death of a Spaceman if you haven't already. Because it's really important context. And they refer back to it all the time because it is still planned to be a thing, even per and Jared. But when you look at Death of a Spaceman and you look at what the ad says, it's like, wait, what? Please take the time to let Tree read it for you. Getting asked to read it. Yeah, it's long. We are going to read a portion of Death of a Spaceman that I think is really relevant to this conversation, but not all of it. But basically, so the gist of Death of a Spaceman is that Chris Roberts wants death to have meaning. He doesn't want you to play Star Citizen like you would play Call of Duty, like you'd play Battlefield, even like you would play MMORPGs. He wants you to have true meaning. He wants you to make tactful decisions. He wants you to plan. He wants you to not treat it like a game, but to treat it like you value your character. And in order to do that, death can't be frequent, but the consequences have to be severe. But at the same time, and everybody who hasn't read Death of a Spaceman thinks that it was always meant to be this super hardcore experience, and it's what's the word for it? Where permadeath and everything, and you only get one. No. It was never meant to be one life. Even before regen, it was never meant to be just one life. But it was always meant for you essentially getting multiple lives, except for instead of you dying, you're only mostly dead. Princess Bride. Anyone? I'm going to put that clip in the video. I swear to God. But that's what they wanted. Instead of what would normally have killed you right now, your ship blowing up and your charred body being recovered in your spacesuit out in space, you taking a headshot while wearing a helmet, all these sorts of things. Yeah, Souls-like is the term, I think. Yep, exactly. He wanted you to things that would be immediately lethal now would not be in the future, and you'd be able to survive and recover from just horrific injuries and horrific incidents. So we're going to read this bit right here. So most players should have some kind of basic insurance, whether it's lifetime hull insurance for everyone that is back so far, or limited duration insurance that will come with later ship packages. A player will even be able to take out a small loan to help finance his or her exploits with the same penalties for non-payment described above, blah, blah, blah. You will be able to run training simulations in the simulator module in your hangar, Arena Commander. Think of this like the arcade game in the pilot's ready room in the original Wing Commander, to practice your combat skills with no penalty. But of course, there is also no financial reward here either. But when you venture out into space proper, the persistent universe, you do put your character at risk, but it will be a long-term one, not an immediate one, because he didn't want you, what we experience in the game right now, where you die immediately so often, because like for me, the last time I died, I was taking off from a distribution center in my cutter. God, I love that little ship. And I requested the hangar doors to open, and I went in third person in my ship, and I watched them open, but they were desynced. And so I was seeing them open, but the server had not opened them yet. And so my client was rendering it, but the game was not, or however that bug worked. And so I lifted off, and I didn't even go that fast, but I went straight up in those hangar doors, kaboom, instant death. But that's not going to be how it works, you know, eventually. That's what resource management and Maelstrom are for. So that way, when you do something like that, when you bump into another ship or an asteroid, that you don't just blow up, but instead, your ship takes damage and it'll be disabled and everything like that, and you're gonna have you're gonna need to call for that NPC Argo SRV to tow you, or somebody to come repair you, or come get a lift. But your ship won't instantly blow up. That's why we have the soft death right now, is to reduce the incidences of that occurring, so that you don't die so often, because they don't want you to actually die. They want you to become downed if need be, but they only want you to die in instances where you suffered a catastrophic incident that advanced medical science wouldn't be able to explain away. Advanced science in general, because it's not just medical science; it's protect your protective equipment, both in your ship and your person. I see each character you play having the ability to die multiple times before the character is finally put to rest, because they doesn't want you to actually die when you are downed and press backspace. They want you to be able to go down, but be able to be revived. They want you to be able to go down and be able to be taken to the hospital and wake up there. They only want you to die and then thus need to be regened in the incidents of catastrophic stuff. So think of this like lives in an old school arcade game. Science in the future is far more advanced than today. Medicine has the ability to bring people back from what would be considered dead in today's world. If you lose in a dogfight and your ship is going to blow, you have a few seconds to eject. If you manage to eject safely and someone doesn't blast your ejected avatar, you won't even have used a life. You'll end up back at the last planet you docked on with a new ship courtesy of system-wide insurance. And this is back in the olden days of Star Citizen being Freelancer 2. You'll have lost your cargo and any upgrades unless you manage to insure those and you were destroyed in a system with a risk level at or below your insurance rating. If you don't manage to eject in time, or someone blasts your ejected character, which carries a harsh penalty if you do this in civilized space, your badly charred and almost dead avatar is recovered and you wake up in a med bay. So think about... Oh, sorry, the baby monitor's making noise because the battery's running low. So even back then, they didn't want what happens to us when we die now, when your ship blows up. They didn't want that to be a thing. That's not what Chris Roberts wanted with Death of a Spaceman. He wanted, if you were blown up in your ship, that you would, essentially... Your body would be recovered, because it would assume that your beacon went off and someone came out to get you, and medical science was able to revive you. But essentially, much of what is incorporated into regen with the the echoes, in this case, this is how you get your
part of the crew,
part of the ship.
Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship.
Thank you so much for the follow, Dr. Robert CI. Appreciate you coming and hanging out with us this evening. Thank you for the support. But he didn't want you to die. What he wanted was for this to be where, like, everybody's all about, I want my bionic arm. That's how this would occur. You would be horrifically injured. Think about it as kind of like being Darth Vader. Yeah, you are essentially Darth Vader, and that's how they would be able to do bioreconstruction. They'd be able to put on bionic limbs, and oh gosh, what's the word for like a mechanical or biomechanical organs. All that sort of stuff. Medical science would be able to bring you back from the dead, even recover brain tissue and so on, but only up to a point. Like you can only replace so much of that stuff. This is also true. Your badly charred and almost dead avatar is recovered and you wake up in a med bay. This is also true if you are killed in a boarding action and your teammates can't or don't recover you. If this happens, it is assumed that your dead body, dead, was evacuated into space and then recovered. And then you are healed. They do bioreconstruction on you and essentially bring you back from the dead, but they can only do that so many times. Yeah, get Vadered. Every death, again, death in quotes, because he's not meaning actual death. They're saying you didn't actually die. You're only mostly dead. Creates wear and tear on your body. And just like with regen, creates wear and tear on your IVS. And traumatic response echoes. Depending on where you were hit and how you died, your character may require a new body part, which can be either cybernetic or organic. That's what Bioticore does. Bioticore created the regeneration tech, the part that bioprints a new human, started out before the whole regeneration with imprinting thing. It started out as tech that they used to grow essentially a cloned organ to replace your liver, your kidneys with a carbon copy of your previous organ, because it comes from from your DNA, so that way your body wouldn't it would reduce the risk of rejection. That is straight up 100% in the lore about Bioticore and its founder. That's how all that got started. And then they married it up with the captured Vandal tech and the imprint Ibrahim Sphere tech. Every death creates wear and tear on your body. Depending on where you were hit and how you died, your character may require a new body part, which can be either cybernetic or organic. Eventually, after too many deaths, your character's body will just give out, and instead of waking up in a med bay, you'll be attending the funeral of your fallen character from the eyes of the beneficiary you specified when originally creating your character. Blah, blah, blah. Essentially, you roll a new character, you pay an inheritance tax, you take a big hit to your reputation because it's like, well, yeah, your dad was a good guy, but I'll let you, we'll give you a start, but I'm not gonna give you the friends and family discount. Blah blah blah. If your old character has done something noteworthy akin to an in-game achievement, his headstone might read, "Here lies blah blah blah." There will also be opportunities to regain some lives or do a reset. Some of this could be through in-game missions, or could just involve paying a lot of money to a specialist on a remote med planet that is doing stem cell research. So that they had planned for this all along, to be able to essentially get lives back. But it was through medicine, not just regen over and over and over again. But yeah, that's the really important parts to me of Death of a Spaceman, other than the overall theme of they want death to be meaningful and they want it to impact your decisions so that you don't play like you play other games, so that you play it not necessarily like a game with permadeath, but closer to that than you would play Battlefield or your traditional MMO, where you're the biggest inconvenience to death is you have to go back and get your gear. Here is the Star Citizen Live Regeneration Elaboration. We're not going to watch this, but I heartily encourage you to watch this after reading the Lore Maker's Guide to Regeneration, because this came out after Lore Maker's Guide to Regeneration. But it has some good information in here. Again, it's elaboration on what they posted in here. So if you really want to fully understand it, I suggest you watch this as well. It's mostly just nuanced stuff that circles around the real meat and potatoes, but it's good information. So we are going to read the Lore Maker's Guide to Regeneration, because not everybody has read this in its entirety, and there's no good just summarizing it, because it's all important. There's too much context in here to just do a Noobifier summary on it. So, since the very earliest days of Star Citizen, the game always embraced the idea that there would be meaningful consequences for player death, because a lot of this is going to reference back to Death of a Spaceman. It's because they linked it right here. Commonly referred to as Death of a Spaceman from the title of the original post on the subject, the hope was to create a dangerous universe that would give real weight to choices and reward players with a true sense of accomplishment if they could complete an adventure still intact. Real weight to choices. Do you undertake that mission? What equipment do you bring with you? Do you bring friends? What ship do you take? What route do you take? How much recon and study about the mission and the area do you do? All that. We wanted you to see your avatar as something to be cared for as much as your ship. The two are inextricably linked. They don't want your ship to be thrown away casually. They don't want your avatar, your character, to be thrown away casually. As discussed by Chris Roberts and Richard Tyrer in the October 30th, 2020 episode of Calling All Devs, this is a very important episode about Death of a Spaceman. I encourage you to watch this because they go into more depth about this. We're not going to watch it right now, but actually, we are going to... Here, I'll pull it up because I want you to listen to one very important part.
It's been this core tenet
that
of Star Citizen's character
is really key to my idea about revive versus respawn. And it's right... This is how many times I've looked it up. Wait. Is this one? Wait, nope, sorry. Playlists and medical.
The actual.
Nope, I want this one. Was it this? Oh, geez. Yep, it was this one. Okay. So, sorry, wrong video. But this is really important because this follows along with what we're talking about with revive versus regen and how they don't want you to just die all the time. So let's see, it's right. There we go. All right, here we are.
Calls out, death is going to be a really important factor in Star Citizen. Now, death, there's kind of 3 deaths along the spectrum. There's kind of what we're calling like the down.
And remember, death is often in quotations, even if they don't do the quotations. But he's saying 3 deaths, but he's going to include the down state because, like Chris was talking about earlier in the actual Death of a Spaceman article, what we would consider death and then normally respawn after dying in a game is not actually dying. It's being downed and then being recovered, revived, healed. But that's what the down state is, a first death because you will need to essentially be revived or respawn, but it's not dying. You respawned after being recovered. You're treated and transported in an ambulance by trauma team, whoever.
State. So that's kind of like when your health has gone to 0 and you're there, and when you're in that scenario, you'll be able to kind of choose to kind of stay there and be like, okay, I need my buddies to come and rescue me. I need the law enforcement to come and help me, or maybe I've paid for some insurance that rescues my body or something like that. Then there is the kind of like you've died in terms of
insurance rescues my body. You are you are mostly dead. Insurance pays trauma team or whoever to take you to a medical facility. Insurance pays trauma team to come and revive you. With your premium on top of that. However you want to do it. But this is pre-regen. This is a year before Regeneration came out, but they were already talking about this. They already had the idea in their head. They just hadn't given it Vanduul lore and the name regen.
You've given up the ghost. Nobody's coming. You're like, okay, that's it. I'm leaving that body there, and I'm going to go back to a hospital and be revived. But that's kind of part of your DNA. That DNA is kind of going to be reimpregnated into essentially a clone of you. And then you'll be able to then go back to your location, and you'll be able to see, your dead body there. And as long as nobody's been there, you'll be able to retrieve your gear and so on and so forth. And then the third aspect.
So that was the second death. The second death. The second death is regen. The third death is does it chat? Let me know. Is anyone into the Galaxy's Edge book series? Anyone know about the big die? if you've read the books or listened to the audiobooks, you know what I'm talking about.
In terms of like you passing on to your next of kin and that kind of thing. So what we're actually evaluating now is kind of how this is integrated into kind of like the core healing gameplay and the actor status. So we already did kind of some of the actor status with
So with this on October 3rd, 2020, they were introducing regen without calling it regen. If you have not read or listened to the Galaxy's, it's not Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. It's a really great book series, and the author, the narrator is probably one of the best in all of audiobooks. Go listen. But so what they just did right here, and with regen, when they added that, is they went from two deaths or two types of death essentially, with Death of a Spaceman, where you had your death in that you were mostly dead and you were recovered and revived and healed and you had the scars of your injuries, but you didn't actually fully permanently die. What they did was they went, but after a number of times, you wouldn't be able to have that happen. You're too far gone, and then you'd actually do the permadeath. Well, they kept the permadeath with regen and what they're talking about here, and that's the third death. And they kept the first death, where you are severely injured and you can be revived while you're down, but you could also be transported back to a hospital, and so forth. But they added the second death, which is regen, and they didn't have the lore for it yet. They didn't have it all worked out, but that's what they were talking about here, with the DNA and the cloning, but it isn't actually cloning. So that's they already made with regen. They made Star Citizen less hard mode, less hardcore, by adding in a second layer of death, to the after the first one, which is the down state and severely injured. So gotta drink some water. Yeah, Galaxy's Edge, Black Ocean, good stuff. If you are looking for audiobook recommendations, if you like audiobooks like me, we have a section in my Discord that is all about book discussion and book suggestions, and I have a bunch of audiobooks pinned in there, and I've got a long list. My Audible library is almost as bad as my Steam library. So actually, if it's probably worse. So as discussed by Chris Roberts and Richard Tyrer on the October 30th, 2020 episode of Calling All Devs, development on Star Citizen's Alpha had progressed to the point where active development of this vital gameplay loop could begin. With the active feature team leading the charge, medical gameplay has been refined to the point where the Alpha 3.15 patch is expected to bring with it the release of Healing Tier 0. To coincide with this brand new gameplay, the narrator team has been working on some brand new lore. While we always knew that medical science would be advanced enough to bring you back from the brink of death, here they are reiterating that, it was during the recent development period that it was decided that players would benefit from being able to come back even if their avatar's body was completely lost. While a lot of scenarios could have been explained away by diligent NPC emergency response teams, finding injured players and bringing them back to civilization, with a game like Star Citizen, there are a lot of cases where even the bravest ambulance pilots wouldn't have been able to retrieve you. Imagine a bold explorer flying themselves directly into the sun, or some friendly outlaws. Blizzrad, hold on. We're gonna fix this. There we go. All right. Blizzrad is now a friendly outlaw. Undying Mercenaries and another military sci-fi that is good. Reviving is a major part of it, and it's more like how CAJ does Revive now. Oh, Undying Mercenaries is another... Oh, okay, cool. I will have to check it now. Blizzrad, you are a... imagine a bold explorer flying themselves directly into the sun, or some friendly outlaws firing a size 9 torpedo directly at your head. Blizzrad is now a friendly outlaw. That is your name. What ambulance is going to rescue you from that? While we could have declared those instances to be permadeaths and forced the player to hand off everything to the next of kin, we were worried about how punishing this would be for people new to playing the game. Yeah, that would be really punishing. Those times where Maelstrom and resource management, or the fact that you're wearing body armor and a helmet and all that, there's no way that they will be able to conceivably explain that you survived this injury. You survived this event. And so that's why they created Regen. Not to replace the diligent NPC emergency response teams finding an injured players and bringing them back to civilization. It's not to replace that. It's to add another layer in between that and permadeath. That's what Regen is for. I liked being a scam supervisor. It made me feel important. We'll alternate. 1 week you can be the scam supervisor, and the next week you'll be the friendly outlaw. But I feel like this is an incredibly accurate description of you and your behavior. And for everyone who's not in my Discord, doesn't know what I'm joking about, I don't even remember how scam supervisor came about. It was some sort of inside joke in the Discord, so I changed your Discord name because I have that power. But yeah, that's again, we have this mention and this idea of you being rescued by NPC emergency response, of you being down, being injured, on the brink of death, and being able to be rescued and brought back to the hospital. And that's why I really love that idea, because this is what in EMS we call just treat and transport. We call 911, we come and get you, we take you to the hospital. But we also have a concept of treat and release, or going or signing AMA, where I can go and I can treat someone, and if they don't want me to take them to the hospital, I cannot legally kidnap them. You could have that. And I need to find that video, but there's like I think it's a Saturday Night Live sketch of this like construction worker who's got like a big old piece of pipe sticking through his chest. And he's all worried about his buddy who fainted and hit his head after seeing the pipe sticking in his chest. And the paramedics are looking at him like, are you okay? You should let us take you to the hospital. And he's like, no, 'tis but a flesh wound. But that should be a thing where you can be a player and you're doing your bunker mission.
Part of the crew.
Hey, Corbin Dallas.
Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship.
Corbin Dallas, thanks for joining us. Good to see you. Glad you can join us live. Thanks for the support. Thanks for the follow. But in addition to treat and transport, the NPCs, taking you to the clinic. And again, for me as a paramedic, I am legally required to take you to the hospital you want me to take you to. Now, within reason, you can't ask me to take you to, Las Vegas. But within reason, I want to go to this hospital in town. Okay, well that's fine. We'll take you. But it doesn't have to be the most appropriate one. You could have a tier 1 injury and say, no, I just want to go to the clinic up there and get my tier 3 and tier 2 injuries healed. I'll worry about the tier 1 later, or just stabilize that one. But I could, it's also, you can call 911 and I can come and treat you. And it can be my sincere medical recommendation that says, please let me take you to the hospital. You are not okay. This is bad. You need more medical help than I can provide. But as a player character, be like, no, I just needed, you to hit me with the med pen. I was too far gone. Thanks for the med pen. Thanks for jabbing me with the med pen. Can you give me a little bit of that green paramed goo? And I'll be on my way. I'm going to finish this bunker. And it's like, but your leg is being held on by by a piece of string. No, I'll be fine. It is but a flesh wound. That should be a player option. You get revived. You've got tier 1 injuries and tier 3 injuries, and you're just hobbling along. But if you want to keep going with that bunker mission, you keep going, buddy, and you can call right back, and the NPCs will call right back. Because not only is that good gameplay and good player agency, it allows players to spend their hard-earned UEC if they want to, if the mission is that important to them, and they just have to finish it. They're this close before they have to, log off for dinner because mom's yelling at them from upstairs and they're down in the basement. That should be a thing. It makes sense in game. It makes sense in the lore. It makes sense, in a believability standpoint. And with the FPS time to kill going up and the injury stratification, there's more and more opportunity for this where instead of just pressing backspace and waking up in a respawn bed, you just wait for a minute and some NPCs, pop out of the spawn closet, or the Cuddy Red lands 100 feet away, and they come in and they jab you with a med pen and be like, "You good to go? All right. Well, we'll see you next time." Sign here or swipe here. You just swipe your Moby glass on their little reader, and out goes 15,000 UEC. But anyway, sorry, tangent. We were worried about how punishing this would be for people new to playing the game. This is why it was decided that Star Citizen needed to have a technology akin to cloning, where players could bring their avatars back from death itself, but with a few key requirements the lore would have to address. Your avatar's memories had to be passed on. No point in making a biological copy if they can't remember anything. The process needed, and this is, essentially continuity for like your missions and your place in your story as a character. The process needs to degrade over time so that people in the universe are not immortal. I've died 1,000 times. Boy, that's seems like functional immortality to me. I don't think that's degrading fast enough for it to not be functional immortality. Just saying. How your avatar perished should be reflected in their new body. If you got blown up, we want to see those scars and cybernetic limbs. And it has always sounded like this is going to be an option because biotic is still a thing, and so if you you have those scars, you could have them removed by the biotic character creator thing. That is in fiction technology for bioreconstruction technology that they developed for service members, who were horribly disfigured from the war with the Vandal. But also they could use that to grow you new legs and reattach a new leg that your body wouldn't reject if you didn't want the cybernetic one, or you could have the cybernetic one. Same thing with organs. You could have a regrown liver or lungs, or you could have a biomechanical one implanted. Just depending on cost, and there'd be debuffs to it, what have you. We also wanted characters to age and not just hop into younger versions of themselves. Again, no functional immortality. There should only be one copy of someone at a time. No clone armies running around. Dang it. I wanted to be Boba Fett. With all these additional elements to work in, it became clear early on that traditional ideas of DNA scans and cloning wouldn't quite meet our needs. Instead, the narrative team worked to create our own fiction to explain the science behind these 30th century medical miracles. Please give a warm Star Citizen welcome to Regeneration. Yeah, so much for the Clone Wars. Yeah, I've died 1,000 times. Well, if you've died 1,000 times, why the hell are we struggling to beat the Vandal? If we've got billions of UE Marines out on the front lines, and each one of them has 1,000 lives, what the fuck is going on? How have we not won this war already? How is Squadron 42 3 episodes? Let's see. Below is a breakdown of some important terms relating to regeneration, some of which you will be seeing in Alpha 3.15, as well as a brief history of the development of this new technology. I've died 1,000 times. I've not learned from my mistakes. Yeah, what happened to the your avatar's memories had to be passed on? How come you keep dying? Yeah, clearly it's because we need more war crimes. Yep. Sickbay commandos charge. Yeah, malingering. But before you get to the new fiction, there's one more Yeah, we've been doing a lot of in my Discord the last couple days. Word to discuss retcon. Since we needed regeneration to be fairly commonplace and widespread in 2951, pardon me, hiccup. To match the gameplay, we had to set the timeline of the lore earlier. However, we also didn't want to invalidate too much earlier lore where characters got killed and stayed dead. This means that the people of the verse have been living with regeneration a bit longer than you as players have, but not too much longer. Moving forward, all lore should hopefully correctly incorporate the history of regeneration, and it has, and its effect on the lives of people living in the UEE and beyond. And of course, with all our systems in active development, expect the below to keep being refined as the gameplay matures. Well, maybe that's what's going on right now. I just don't, if that's what's going on right now, I don't like the way it's being refined. Because it's not being refined, it's being beaten with a hammer into a bloody pulp. Our hope is that all this will serve as a solid foundation from which we can build upon. Finally, feel free to ask questions in the Lore Ask a Dev forum on Spectrum, and we will try to answer what we can in our upcoming quarterly Lore Makers Community Questions posts. If you see these posted, do not sleep on them. There is so much good information. Some of it's just, campy, fun questions that are answered, but a lot of it is really good information. That's why I cover these in Lore Equals Gameplay. So, terminology. Imprint, the term for a complete and holistic bioscan of an individual that not only creates a record of one's DNA, but also all their memories, thoughts, and personality. While imprints can be transferred between spheres without loss, you have lossless transfer between spheres. Only one copy of an imprint can exist at the same time. Updating an imprint will override all previous imprints. This is why this is one part of why we don't need tier 2 tier 2 and tier 3 bed regen. We just need to be able to do imprinting at tier 2 beds in order to maintain your IVS. Because if you only are regenerating at due to a catastrophic injury, you don't need to be, that's not going to be happening frequently. And you don't need them everywhere. You don't need tier 1 beds everywhere. You just need them spread out enough that, it's not a horrible inconvenience to regen, but it is an inconvenience, just like every other game out there. Death needs to have some inconvenience to it. Full on death. Not, if you just get downed, it shouldn't be that inconvenient. You should just get jabbed with a med pen either from players or NPCs in fairly short order. But we don't need, with the game at 1.0 at release, where you're not dying to, strafing up into the hangar doors that haven't actually opened. You don't need to have respawnability at every station or on every ship. You just need to have hospitals at every landing, major landing zone, and you need to have essentially trauma team mobile headquarters in terms of endeavors and maybe even galaxies spread out throughout the verse, to help fill in the gaps. That's it. You don't need to water down regen. You don't need to have a tier 2 respawn on every ship because it just wouldn't make sense to have it if it's what it's meant to be. But that's my take. And I'm going to explain more about why. Regeneration. This is the term for the process in which an imprint is used to recreate the deceased source. Using the information stored in the imprint, a new body is regenerated that is a near identical copy of the original, barring the effect of any echoes. Barring the copy of the original, and the original gets updated in real time. We're going to talk more about that in a second. Ibrahim Sphere, the technology inside medical beds and scanners not just medical beds and scanners. You have the Abraham sphere and the ability to scan your imprint in med beds, and it should be in appropriate med beds, not just every single one, but also scanners. What we need is the ability to not just use a med bed to update your imprint, but be able to just go up to a scanner at a station and be like, you know what, my IVS is getting kind of low. I'm going to update it. And I'll just update it here while I'm here. And once I get back to Lorville, I'll do another tier 1 scan. Because a tier 2 scan, it's important to distinguish the fact that you're doing an imprint with a lower quality bed negatively impacts your imprint viability score and your imprint, and essentially reduces the number of lives that you have. Hence why I've died 1,000 times, and yet you keep respawning out of a tier 3 bed. Makes no sense. Yeah, and I think that having a tier 1 bed is something that is perfectly fine for a player base, but that would be like the top tier. It's really expensive, costs a lot of resources to build, and just like on the Apollo, it takes up a lot more space than tier 2 and tier 3 beds. That would be fine by me. I think that's okay. I don't think tier 1 beds should only be at landing zone hospitals. I think they should be on hospital ships that are operated by NPCs and players throughout the verse, and I think it should be at major landing zones, as well as in terms of like cities, but also major points of interest. So your low Earth orbit stations in Pyro for the different planets. I think it's fine for each pirate faction that controls a station to have one. That way, no matter who you have reputation with in Pyro, you're not going to be cut out of having access to a tier 1 bed. It makes sense that the pirates would have access to a tier 1 bed. Now, it might not be a great tier 1 bed. It should have some negative effects to it, but that's part of being a pirate. And okay, well, be a pirate and have your own Apollo or your own galaxy, and that way you don't have to deal with the shoddy tier 1 bed at Ruin Station. But I think it should be accessible. I think there should be one at Levski, and so on and so forth. But I also think that the NPCs should be flying around in galaxies and endeavors, the trauma team mobile headquarters 5, and that's where they deploy their Cuddy Reds from, and where they bring patients back to when it's not in Stanton or Terra or Killian, Keel, what have you, that sort of thing. That's what I think is better than just regen, all the time. Let's see. The Ibrahim Sphere, the technology inside medical beds and scanners that allows them to create and store imprints made out of advanced materials that are alien in origin. So they're alien in origin, so we learned how to make them ourselves, or are we somehow getting more of them? The technology behind the spheres was made public to encourage mass production and development. Mass production of the Ibrahim Sphere to allow for creating and storing imprints. It is important to note that not all spheres are created equal. Higher quality spheres are better able to preserve imprints and cause less trauma during the regeneration process, allowing for more cycles before viability failure. So, makes sense. Your tier 1 bed does a better scan than a tier 2 bed. I don't think a tier 3 bed should be able to do a scan. I don't think it's necessary. I think that having this inside of it on top of everything else would make it too big to fit in the back of a MRSA. I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think it's necessary. I think that, having a tier 2 scanner at every freaking station and tier 1 scanners, at every landing zone hospital and, capital class hospital ship is, and significant locations like low Earth orbit stations, in Pyro or Levski, major locations, major faction locations. Let's call it major faction locations and city hospitals. I think that is where we need tier 1 beds, and everything else is the in between where I don't have time to go back to that tier 1 bed in Lorville or Levski, but I don't want my imprint viability score to get too low. So I'm going to bump it back up with a tier 2 scan, and then once I'm able to make it back to a tier 1 bed, I'll update my scan. I also think that based off what's said here, I think you should be able to. I think it says loosely that you should be able to update your scan remotely. You know, maybe you don't want to move your regeneration location. Maybe you want, hey, I want to regenerate here at Lorville or at Microtech. At the hospital at Microtech is supposed to be like the best hospital chain in the verse. So maybe that's where you want to regenerate, but you want to update your high quality tier 1 imprint that you have stored there, but you're far away from there. I think that because there's lossless transference between spheres, I think you should be able to go to another tier 1 bed and update your imprint locally, you know, and say, okay, I either want to transfer, I would want to create a new imprint and have it stored here, or I want to update my imprint over there, but keep that as my regeneration location. I think that is also a really good mechanic that they should incorporate, rather than if you make an imprint, if you do a scan, it stores your imprint there. I think you should be able to do a scan to either update an imprint or create a new imprint. Update an imprint remotely, and you could do that with a tier 2 bed. You know, it just would, change how your IVS is calculated. Traumatic response echo. Commonly known as an echo, this is the term used to describe the link between an imprint and its source. When a major traumatic event occurs, such as death or even regeneration itself, the psychological impact of it can sometimes be strong enough to permanently alter the imprint. For example, if a person's legs are crushed prior to death, there is a possibility that an echo will be created that will alter the imprint so that the individual's legs are no longer functional. So that's where the healing portion comes in. So you can regenerate with busted ass legs, or your legs are there, but your brain can't communicate with them because of the traumatic response echo. And so that's like saying, it's also saying like if you regenerate with your IVS score too low, it can cause random echoes. Echoes are the reason why patients may regenerate bearing the scars and wounds of how they died, and why only one copy of a person can exist at a time. Regeneration itself also creates echoes, and over time, an individual's imprint will degrade and become less viable. This is also why imprints cannot be used to extend life, as the process of aging itself echoes through the imprints. However, testing has shown that the higher quality the medical equipment and sphere, the less severe the impact of echoes will be. So yeah, if you regenerate with a tier 1 bed, the echoes are less severe. It's less of a cost to then have them healed. You already had a tier 1 bed, so on. Imprint viability score. This is the number used to rate the viability of an imprint to be used in regeneration. Owing to the degradation experienced from echoes, imprints eventually become so damaged they are no longer viable, and the individual will no longer be able to be regenerated. Using higher quality imprints and equipment helps prolong a patient's IVS. Spheres can only vary in magnitude. This writer fails geometry. Regen, term for an individual who has undergone regeneration, also slang for the process of regeneration itself. Cycle, the term references the period between regenerations. People will ask each other what cycle they are on to inquire how many times they have been regenerated. People are sometimes impressed by how long others have gone without needing a regen. Pardon me, need to drink some more water. Oops. Gap. The term refers to the length of time between an imprint being made and when someone is regenerated. The longer the gap, the more memories and experiences will be lost. Frequent imprinting is strongly encouraged. They want you to keep your gap shorter in order to maintain your imprint viability score. That's why you update your imprints every so often. It's maintenance. It's part of maintenance on your character, just like maintenance on your ship. Bioticore Regen Serum. This advanced progenerative distillate is used as a base material from which cells, tissues, and organs can be bioprinted for use in regeneration. Wiped. This is the term used to express when someone's IVS is low enough that they can no longer be regenerated. The term originated from reference to an imprint being permanently wiped from an Ibrahim sphere. Outlaws will sometimes refer to wiping someone out as killing them in a manner that will stop them from regenerating. Also can be referred to as ghosting. Dead, kill, murder, etc. As regeneration is still a relatively new technology, these terms still refer to the stopping of life functions, regardless of whether the individual is able to be regenerated or not. Pardon me. Give me 1 second. I'm going to open up a window because it's getting warm in here. All right, let's read about the history. Famed scientist Dr. Aka Ibrahim, J. Calvin, says we are getting very close to this in cybernetics coming to the verse. Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, Idaho warm, so like negative 23 degrees. No, it's warm in my office. I generally start the podcast with the door closed before my wife and son go to bed due to background noise, and like my neighbors are backing into their driveway with a trailer right now across the street, so you might be able to hear the truck in the background. But with the door and the windows closed, it gets real stuffy in here with my computer running. So, pardon me. So, famed scientist Dr. Aka Ibrahim has dedicated his career to finding a way to restore mental capacity to patients suffering from severe head injuries, brain trauma, or the ravages of degenerative diseases by obtaining detailed scans of their brain before trauma occurred. In early experiments, Dr. Ibrahim was able to repair some brain functionality, like motor functions, but any attempts to restore memories or personality were unsuccessful. Pardon me. While his breakthrough in brain scans helped many patients regain some functionality, if a major mental loss occurred, it seemed there was little chance of fully restoring the person. Based on his reputation as a medical scan expert in 2932, which is we're 2954 now, so 22 years ago in lore. Dr. Ibrahim was invited by the UE government to study captured Van Duel biogenetic scanning technology. The recovered salvage was more advanced than anything that humans had developed, and even seemed beyond much of the Van Duel tech that had been previously studied. Dr. Ibrahim and his team were scarcely able to deconstruct the technology they found, or even fully understand how and why the Van Duel were using it. However, it wasn't until a covert naval operation in 2946, which is assumedly when we captured what's called, I think it's the X ship or something like that. We believe it was a Van Duel driller, which is a massive Van Duel carrier. Not as big as a King ship, but it's the size of a Bengal. Probably need to cough one more time. Whenever I do these shows and get to talking a lot, it always tries me out. Makes me have to cough. However, it wasn't until a covert naval operation in 2946 that new military intelligence allowed Dr. Ibrahim to unlock the full potential of the technology. So this is essentially after the events of Squadron 42, but not long after, like the next year. Ibrahim Sphere, the end result of years of research and the creation of advanced xenomorphic materials inspired by the captured Vandal technology, the innovative Ibrahim Sphere allows for complete biogenetic imprints to be made of a person. Far beyond just DNA and mental scans, the imprint captures a complete version of someone, including their memories and even their personality. The most surprising thing, however, is that the imprint does not remain static after it's made. SC is my favorite game because there's so much lore that I literally get lost. I hear you. I have been following the lore religiously since the very beginning. I even went back and have reread a lot of it multiple times. And there are few, if any, games where the developers are the ones that create this lore. Like, there's a lot of really deep IPs out there, but it's usually not on the game developer to write the lore. It's on the originator of the IP, whether it's a book or a movie series, TV show, blah blah blah. SE creating its own lore is really unique, and there is so much, and it's so good, and that's why I like covering it on my channel. So yeah, go check out Lore Equals Gameplay on my YouTube. The surprising thing, however, is that the imprint does not remain static after it's made. Traumatic response echoes. While the process is still not fully understood, the information recorded onto the sphere retains a connection to its source. If the source undergoes any major life experiences, such as traumatic injury or death, the imprint is permanently altered. And this is how it's just updated, regardless of whether you do it as part of an imprint or not. Known commonly as traumatic response echo or simply echo. Attempts at using imprints while the source is still alive have all resulted in failure. A leading hypothesis currently being studied is that the unique properties of the sphere may be creating a connection similar to quantum entanglement, linking the imprint to its source across interspace. While at first the discovery of echoes left Dr. Ibrahim feeling dismayed as he had hoped to be able to repair still living patients, a new medical path forward presented itself when the Ibrahim spheres were paired with new groundbreaking tech developed under military contract by Bioticor. Pardon me, sorry. Didn't mute it in time. So that's the thing, is the Ibrahim sphere and the regeneration tech are two separate things combined together in a medical bed in order to regenerate someone. I can't imagine that it's the size of this, ice cream cup. Like, oh, whoops, I forgot there was still some in there. Excuse me. Waste not, want not. Don't judge me. Yeah. So, regeneration. In 2949, the first successful regeneration of a human occurred using rapid bioprinting technology created by Bioticor and the imprint information stored on an Ibrahim sphere. Recognizing this breakthrough's potential, Imperator Addison authorized trillions of credits into making the technology as widely available as possible, going so far as to make the specifications for the Ibrahim sphere public so that multiple companies could produce the scanners and bioprinters needed. So the technology for the Ibrahim sphere is public. The bioprinters are Bioticor technology. Those are not public. That's why the med beds are. That's a Bioticor thing. But making it so that the Ibrahim sphere, so the companies could produce the scanners and bioprinters needed. So that's why it makes sense that the scanners would be much more ubiquitous. Think of it like a CT scanner. They're everywhere. They're in every hospital. But a something that can recreate a human wouldn't be everywhere. So today, while the regeneration process remains costly, if it's costly, it won't be ubiquitous, because it wouldn't make sense to put it everywhere if it's so costly. Because if it's expensive, like going to a tier one, a level one trauma center, because that's the level of trauma care you need, is extremely expensive. It costs more than going to a level 2 or level 3 trauma center for that kind, for trauma care, because they have those kinds of capabilities. And that's why there are very few level 1 trauma centers. They're really only in major cities at university medical centers. Most major cities have one, if not two, at most. And so that's part of the reason why it wouldn't make sense to have have it on tier 2 beds and have it be on every ship with a tier 2 bed, because it's costly. If it's that costly, and we'll see how costly it is here in a few minutes when we read more in the lore, people would just take the inconvenience and say, I'll just go back to this hospital or wherever. No company is going to spend the money to put them everywhere when it's a matter of just time and gas to get people back to where they were after a regeneration, rather than just regenerating closer to where they were. Wing Commander and Freelancer were good. Yeah, they definitely set the tone. I mean, that's how I got into Star Citizen. I'm a old school Wing Commander Freelancer fan. Wing Commander was my first PC game. It's how I got into building PCs. My dad and I built a PC just so I could play Wing Commander after playing it at my cousin's house because I was in love. Core memory right there. So today, while the regeneration process remains costly, even the lowliest space station is equipped with an imprint-capable medical scanner. Not bioprint or not regeneration-capable bioprinter bed. Imprint-capable medical scanner. And billions of lives have been saved because people have ready access to these medical scanners in order to create imprints and to be able to create imprints and update their imprints so that way they can regenerate. Because remember, if you don't update your imprint and you let your IVS get too low, you won't be able to regenerate. You will still die. So by having easy access and making imprinting be cheap and easily accessible, that's how you save lives. You don't have to have lots of tier 1 beds. You don't need to have a whole lot of regeneration beds to save lives. You need to have easy access and cheap access to the imprint technology. However, as with any technological breakthrough, there are still a lot of doubts over the tech. Religious groups have protested what they see as a capture of a being's soul, and some economic groups, joke's on you, I don't have one, have expressed worry that the sudden extension of life will have a serious impact on society. Also, despite assurances that creating multiple imprints of the same person is technologically impossible, the fear of clone armies remains. To help with this, the government has already passed several severe laws around the possibility of attempting to grow multiple versions of an individual, as such a feat would cause havoc on the notion of taxation and criminal justice. Of course, the government wants to be able to tax you and take you to court. That's what they care about. But they'll probably bioprint their clone army in a bunker, on oh gosh, what's the name of the? Oh, how am I forgetting the name of the UE Marine base on the Hoth planet in Killian? Dad is really techy to build a PC in the 90s. They were way hard to assemble back then. Yeah, my dad has always been very technologically savvy, but my dad's a fire protection engineer, and so he's been working with computer-based CAD since like the 80s. So we have had a PC at home since I was like 4. And most of the time we had more than one. Because after my dad, when my dad would buy a new one, because doing CAD work is very tech heavy. You got to have a good computer for it. You need good GPUs and powerful processors. When he would get a new one, the old one would just go in the kitchen, and that would be the family computer. So like I had a family computer for playing video games on, with DOS and Windows 3.1, like way back when. Yeah, even before Voodoo graphics. Yeah. So yeah, that is the initial lore on regen. And so some key takeaways. Regeneration is expensive. From the lore, regen is expensive, and it is the imprint-capable medical scanners that are ubiquitous, not regen beds. They are two separate things. Scanning and regeneration are two separate things. There are scanners and there are regeneration beds. You can have a bed that does both, but you can also have an independent scanner. Because that's the important part of being able to stay alive, is maintaining your IVS so that way you can be regenerated. When you go off on that long exploration mission, that's why you need a tier 2 bed in a Carrick or an Odyssey. So that way, if you're not going to be back to civilization for a long time, you can continue to update your IVS. So that way it doesn't degrade, and if something does happen, you aren't able to regenerate, or you don't regenerate with worse echoes. You're doing preventative medicine, is what you're allowing for by having imprinting on tier 2 beds and being able to maintain your imprint and your IVS. Yep. Yeah, must maintain IVS to be best crew member. Yes, because there are not enough bathrooms on ships. Yeah. So let's move on to the next bit of regen lore. And it's mentioned heavily in 5 Lore Makers community questions. And I've got these in chronological order. So the first time is, let's see, I'll scroll back up the top. This one, oh gosh, they don't have the date on this. This was in 2022 because this first article came out in 2021. So this, I think, is like February 2022 is when this one came out. So it's only in the newer ones that they start putting the date at the top. They were just putting the date for the next one up there. But they do them every quarter. So the question is, what's to keep people from using regen as a method of FTL communication? So like if you died in another system and you had information, you could just commit suicide and regen back where your imprint is stored in order to bring that information back with you. Because in Star Citizen, we don't have faster than light communication. Like we don't have ways to send information from Vega to Sol instantaneously. Data running. Information has to be transmitted across systems and then via drone or ship through jump points. The current regen tech seems to lend itself to FTL communication. How do you see it impacting more traditional data running? Answer. Since faster than light communication doesn't exist in the Star Citizen universe, it's easy to see why dying and immediately regenning elsewhere seems like a tempting data running option. That said, we've done our best to make an ineffective one. When doing a mission, data would probably have to be stored on a physical device, which would either remain on the deceased body or the server aboard their now abandoned ship. Needing a physical device or ship server to store and transfer the data should negate regen as a viable FTL option for missions. Narratively, it does get a little trickier when it comes to general knowledge about stuff like the location of an enemy encampment or extremely valuable mineral load. As a player, you could regen with the knowledge still fresh and share it with others to your advantage. We address this in lore with the concept of gap, which refers to the length of time between an imprint being made and when someone is regenerated. The longer the gap, the more memories and experiences will be lost, which is why frequent imprinting is strongly encouraged. And they're going to talk more about this in the most recent jump point, which explains how you can't just get away with murder just because the the comm relay is down. Because if you have a narrow gap, if you have maintained your regen, you'll have those memories and you'll be able to report the crime. That's how they're gamifying that. The longer the gap, the more memories and experiences will be lost, which is why frequent imprinting is strongly encouraged. Regen, making people's short-term memory a bit hazy, reduces the reliability of this method of data running. In addition, the regen process degrades that person's imprint and makes it less viable going forward. That's what you need to continue to imprint. You can't just keep regenning and regenning and regenning without creating a new imprint. While some might try to exploit the tech for communication, it'll come at the cost of degrading their imprint and bringing them a step closer to being wiped, which means that character will not be able to regen. So the big takeaway from that is that you can retain some knowledge of what's going on, what was going on around you before you died. But if you have how much you retain depends on how long it's been, your gap since the last time you imprinted. So if you maintain your imprint and update regularly and keep that gap short, you keep more memories, blowing out the head. Yeah. Just shooting someone in the head doesn't guarantee that they, won't remember what happened. Jake Calvin says, so what you think the nurse respawn does, then I think it's just giving us the ability to bring this closer to reality. Though the comment about bed logging no longer just has me concerned about breaking the lore with Gap. I think the Nursa is terrible. I think the Nursa commercial is awful because the Nursa commercial throws all the regen lore and the idea of Death of the Spaceman out the window. I don't think, I think it's fine as a temporary solution. I think taking respawn away from tier 3 beds, given the state of the alpha, was a mistake and was premature when they did it in 2021 with Alpha 315. But oh God. But I think in terms of a 1.0 mechanic, I do not think that regeneration in tier 3 beds is good. I do not think regeneration in tier 2 beds is good. I think we need more revive and less regen because that's what CIG has been going for the entire time up until this point. Is that it was regen was just sort of a additional layer in between being downed and being revived with after taking horrible injuries and advanced medical science recovering you, and permadeath. Regen is only supposed to be for the cases where advanced medical science can't revive you. Yeah, it is, and I'm gonna be blunt about this. It is and that's why I'm going through all this. So, you guys will understand where I'm coming from and why I think the way that I do, because after reading this, to me, it is objectively bad. So it's a lore solution, but not a gameplay solution. Which part, Danger Hobo? Because some of the lore is just flavor text to just sort of like explain how this works in the universe and why it works. But a lot of it is definitely gameplay related and has gameplay implications. This is actually tied into the Jump Point article that we'll read at the end, which is literally last month. Yeah, I think that the only reason tier 3 beds have respawn is because of the alpha state, and that's fine. I think that's great. But I also think that CIG should be working towards a more robust revive mechanic and incorporating the use of NPCs to do so, as they talked about in the Lore Maker's Guide to Regeneration and in Death of a Spaceman and in the Calling All Devs with Chris Roberts and Rich Tyler themselves, where they talk about NPCs doing it and having a robust revive mechanic before regenning versus just skipping straight to regen all the effing time. 1,000 times. So That's the first mention in about regen in Lore Makers Community Questions. The next one is it's mentioned twice in this article, but the first one is more talking about emergency medicine. I want to read about that because it's really good context about this and why my idea of a robust revive system and trauma team, etc., it is really what we need more than just a watered down regen. So this one was the one. Here we go. Here's the date. So August 23rd, 2022. This is a year and less than 2 years ago. So let's read this first question. What's life like in the emergency medicine profession? And so for context, when medical gameplay was really first announced with and talked about with the release of the Endeavor and the Endeavor Hope class hospital module, Tony Zurvek said, responded to the question regarding medical gameplay and all that. And he basically said that it's meant to be one of the most robust professions in the game, which is why a lot of the medical people, the people who are interested in medical gameplay for Star Citizen, are really not happy about the Ursa commercial and everything, the implications of it. But that's part of why this question was answered, because we have gotten some information over the years about medical gameplay, even before 3.15, and they've had a lot of ideas, but they just haven't been able to bring them to fruition. But what we have right now is a really good starting point, in my opinion. The actor statuses we have, and the med pens that we have, even though they're not used very often, most people don't treat their injuries a whole lot. They really should. I think the statuses should be a little bit more punishing to get you to use your paramed device more often. But it is 100% a gamified version of pharmacology and pharmacokinetics, and I think it's great. It could be expanded upon, but when I read about all that stuff, I teach critical care pharmacology to flight nurses and flight paramedics. It's one of my favorite subjects, and so I'm a bit of a goober on it. And when I read about what we have in game, it's like whether they meant for it to make sense or not, I don't know, but it's good. The blood drug level thing is a gamified version of pharmacokinetics, and I love it. Yes, yeah. The lore makes the game have rules, because games have rules. That's part of any game, whether a board game, or a card game, a video game, a TTRPG. They have rules, and that's what gives Guidelift versus just being open and nothing matters. And the NERSA takes all these rules set by the lore and ideas set by the lore and says, meh. At least the NERSA commercial. The NERSA commercial. And where they take it eventually, I don't know. The NERSA commercial has very much shaken my confidence, on top of the idea of having tier 2 beds being regen capable. Because I just read to you, got the stuff about regen that says, why would we have tier 2 beds be regen capable? Why would stations have regeneration capability? Now it makes sense it totally makes sense in the alpha state. The Backspace Express to a station and to the NERSA, to Cuddy Red, the C8R, makes sense in the alpha state. In the 1.0 release version of Star Citizen, it does not. There are better ways. So, what's life like in the emergency medicine profession? Questions. I'm interested in the lore behind the medics and doctors of the Star Citizen universe. As we all know, the verse is a cold and dangerous world where death lurks around every corner. It's only natural for hospital staff and paramedics to be up-armored or even more respected, right? Are they paid better than we would consider today? What's the EMS system look like, and are there any prominent individuals that pioneered emergency medicine for the future? So, again, check out the Here, we'll RSI Apollo transmission. Here we go. I'm not going to read this. I'm going to copy and paste it into the chat. Read this. Read the stuff about the Apollo. It's just a little bit, but this is good lore about EMS and paramedics and rescue surrounding the Apollo. Answer. Medicine occupies a really important place both in the verse and in Star Citizen's gameplay. However, aspects of this topic, like how much medics and doctors earn, have more to do with design than lore. We'll leave that side of things to the design team. As for the lore, the portfolio on the Brentworth Care Centers, another really good article to read, very interesting. Brentworth is what we have in Microtech, fancy hospitals. It's a shame we don't need the Apollo anymore. Yeah, why do I need an Apollo when I can just have 6 nurses? You know, in a Caterpillar. Yeah. The answer is ultimately quite simple. First, most well-equipped hospitals are in larger cities and space stations, which to me, this is why like having a hospital at your faction locations or in star systems that don't have a city, but they have a major space station, you know, or even an asteroid facility where it would make sense to have like a smaller but well-equipped hospital. And space stations which have fail-safes in place to mitigate danger. Threats to the medical infrastructure of those areas would elicit an immediate response from the governing authority. So they're saying that this is why your doctors at Brentworth aren't carrying guns and wearing armor because they're in the middle of Microtech. God, I hope so. Eventually. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I'm still gonna buy a Nursa. Because I think eventually CIG will get there, and I think eventually they're going to make the right decisions, what I think are the right decisions, or better decisions, in order to preserve this aspect of the game while still allowing for convenient revive, and you know, which essentially is convenient respawn, but don't do it by watering down regen and Death of a Spaceman. Yeah. Yeah, and it's not just the Nursa, it's just the Nursa commercial, you know, because the C8R didn't bring this about. The Cuddy Red didn't bring this about. It was the Nursa. Yeah. I mean, I use the med gun all the time. But, you know, the med gun isn't nearly the issue that the tier 3 beds and the Nursa are. And well, the language in the Nursa commercial. Seeing hospital staff in armor would likely distress patients, blah, blah, blah. Of course, in a place where violent crime is rampant like Grimhex, you would probably expect the doctors and medical staff would have more weapons and armor on display or easily accessible. So yeah, your hospital at and I always brain fart on the names of the stations in Pyro other than Ruin, but your clinics in those stations would have guards. Because they don't want people running around and just shooting up people, oh, gang warfare. Well, we only wounded him and he made it to the clinic, so we're going to go in there and shoot him. And it's like, no. Chuck Testa. So next, you also ask, and Othmion's not listening, but I like this part because I enjoy the Tavaran and their lore. But next, you also asked about paramedics and emergency medical services. There are many different kinds of emergency medical providers in the verse. There are many different kinds of emergency medical providers in the verse. Here they are saying that trauma team, both public and private, exists. Some of them work for planetary governments, others for individual hospitals, and the rest, the vast majority of such groups, are private companies that provide different specialties and/or zones of operation. Trauma team. Give trauma team. For example, Example. Rajora Rescue. Rajora being the sort of quasi-religion of the Tavaran. A Tavaran volunteer organization providing free medical service to Tavaran communities around the verse and using their efforts to help renew a sense of cultural pride and identity amidst their diaspora. I can't wait to be a space medic and be able to do rescue missions for Rajora Rescue. That's the gameplay that I want. Yeah, socially confused. I agree. The flip flopping, says that this was not the plan all along, because I forget when the Cuddy Red came out. You guys may remember, but when the Cuddy Red came out with the tier 3 beds, it was the very basics of medical gameplay. It was the only med beds we had, and it was the only you could set your respawn there, and that was it. And then when 315 came out with medical tier 0 and active status tier 1, they took away respawn from the Cuddy and gave it to only the tier 2 beds at stations, tier 1 beds at hospitals, and then the tier 2 beds on the 890 jump and the Carrick. And Richard Tyrer said quite specifically that was never the plan. It was never intended. It was always temporary. Yeah. It is a CIG shot themselves in the foot, and really they need to make a big public statement saying, "Hey, we goofed. We're sorry. We did not handle this well." I would like for them to take the Nursa commercial down. I think it sets a very bad precedent. Especially if you're saying that you want to preserve Death of a Spaceman and Regen, but you have that Nursa commercial just contradicts everything. Just get rid of it. Make it go away. Apologize. Do a Sony. And we can all move on. Yeah. And the tier affects the range of the regen. Like, what? So, yeah. Regen, which works, like your imprint works off of quantum entanglement, but you can't now regen is limited by kilometers. Huh? Okay, so what if you make your imprint at Lorville and then you get killed at Pyro? Do somehow tier 1 beds have infinite range? But tier 2, 3 beds, tier 2 and tier 3 beds are limited to basically the space around a planet. No, that's a garbage mechanic. That is. Sorry, I'm going to be mean about this. It's fine for alpha balancing, but as a long-term way to balance the mechanic, that is trash. Yeah, your character gets deleted if you're out of range. 14 4K modem. Oh gosh, yeah. Sorry, that's the meanest I'm going to be, but that's honestly how I feel. And it's not a dig on the devs. It's just finding all this literally took me less than an hour. It took me less than an hour to find all these links and reread them. And I've read them all multiple times, and I'm like, how is this what they're coming up with? After putting all this out, was the lore team even consulted? It's the whole the meme gif. Am I a joke to you? Because it just seems like they no one even asked them. Were they out sick when they had that meeting? Yeah. So, sorry. Let's keep reading. Emergency medical responders arm and armor themselves differently based on a number of factors, including their company and location of operation. God, we could get some really cool looking armor and suits and stuff, for having different rep with different, trauma team type companies. Hell yeah. Some are more specialized paramedics, but there's much more to emergency response than just medical treatment. In the broader field of search and rescue, responders need the skills and gear to address and overcome many different disaster scenarios. As a result, they are more likely to carry armor and weapons along with multi-tools, fire extinguishers, and other more specific pieces of equipment, depending on the nature of the beacon they're responding to. That's another reason I'm really excited for the Legionnaire. Boarding and capturing pirates to then salvage their organs, but also for rescue, to be able to put a whole bunch of repair and cutting tools and healing stuff on there with your team to then go to someone who's put on a beacon for rescue and their ship's super damaged and you have to force you have to dock with them and then force the door open and help them get their ship back up while also treating their injured. To me, that is like peak gameplay. For me, that doesn't get any better than that. Especially like if you can go there in the midst of a boarding operation. I mean, you counter the boarding operation, then you help them repair their ship and get back up and going, and you heal a few of their people, blah, blah, blah. And then you give them a Walgreens, CVS receipt that's a mile long, itemizing, that'll be 3.5 million UEC. And if you don't have the money, we're just going to take your ship. Yeah. Lastly, you asked about notable individuals in the field of medicine. We'd be remiss not to mention doctors Dio Nicolas and Ted Santos, who founded Bioticore, a very cool piece of lore reading. We're not going to read it right now, but I'll drop it in the chat for you guys. I do encourage you to read it because it's cool. It's interesting. Bioticore is a wickedly cool company. Paul just did a video on it. I think it's up publicly on his YouTube. Go watch the video. Give it a like. If you don't subscribe to Paul already, do so. Leave a comment in the video because it doesn't get enough traffic, but go watch the video. You know what? Fuck it. Hold on. I'll find the video real quick and I'll put the link in chat because Paul is friend. The video's got 3.8K views, but we gotta pump those numbers up. If you haven't watched the video already, go watch it. Yeah. Oh geez. Who founded Bioticore, the cutting edge? Oh geez.
Part of the crowd. Part of the ship. Part of the crew. Part of the ship. Part of the crew.
Part of the ship.
Part of the crew. Part of the ship.
God, I wasn't expecting that, and so it made my heart jump out. I need a med pen. Thank you for the follow, Calvin. Thanks for the support. Thanks for coming and hanging out with us this evening. The cutting edge Bioticore, the cutting edge medical manufacturer responsible for the creation of the Calliope machine, our character creator. Now used widely throughout the UE, it can efficiently perform massive bioreconstructive surgery that would have previously taken a team of surgeons multiple operations. Again, this is why we don't need regen all the time. We have the Calliope machine. If you have massive injuries, you don't respawn, you get treated and transported to a medical bed. We have the auto dock, which can heal injuries and such. But again, rather than regen, you need to go get healed up. Rather than dying, you get revived and you go get healed up. We have the tools, we have everything we need in game. But if they're going to write the regen lore like they did, where, hey, your IVS goes down if you regen too much, you can't regen again, you have all these negative implications, it's super costly. Why the F would you choose regen rather than just going, to a nearby hospital? Now, it's one thing if you're like, hardcore, okay, we'll bring your tier 1 bed. But if it was all of those things, they wouldn't make it everywhere. They would just put it at the hub hospitals where they had the tier 1 beds. Because no one in their right mind would make that decision or plan ahead to make that decision. The device is so effective, it's even been adopted for cosmetic surgeries. Plus, as mentioned in an early question, there is also Dr. Ibrahim, who changed the universe with his work on regeneration. So there you have it. Medicine is always evolving with new technologies, rapidly challenging our understanding of what it means to live in the verse. Okay, so that's more about medical gameplay. Here's a regeneration question from the same post. Question: since regeneration slowly deteriorates the body each time you die, wouldn't it deteriorate the brain? People could start to become less rational and paranoid. That's probably me. I've been regenerated too many times. Or other side effects after each regeneration. It could get to the point where their brains won't let them take care of themselves, and you have instances where people say something like, "Don't worry about Bob, he's just had one too many regenerations." You're absolutely right. Bob could be in a lot of trouble. Regeneration technology is still quite new to the verse and not without issues. The question of how regeneration impacts the brain is particularly interesting. If you want to learn more about regeneration technology, I recommend you read the Foundational Death of a Spaceman post to learn more, to learn about some of the underpinning thinking behind the ongoing design of the system. Again, regeneration didn't retcon Death of a Spaceman. It just added in an intermediary. Instead of, mostly dead and then all the way dead, and you mostly dead multiple times and then you permadeath, you have mostly dead, and you can, mostly dead, mostly dead, mostly dead, as many times as you want, because you can get revived and you've got the Calliope machine. But if you actually die, then you have regen, and you can regen multiple times before you finally reach permadeath. So it didn't retcon any of this. It just inserted something in between. If you're looking for a short glossary of regeneration-related terminology, as well as a primer on the history of this unprecedented technology, The Loremaker's Guide to Regeneration is another post worth reading. We already read that. To summarize, though, regeneration tech as we know it is fundamentally a synthesis of alien technology and human ingenuity. My problem has always been, why should players be special compared to NPCs if SC lore going so deep? What do you mean by special? Elaborate. I'm not sure what I don't follow. Let's see. Even before gaining access to the Vanduul biogenetic scanning technology that would pave the way for the creation of the Ibrahim sphere, Dr. Aka Ibrahim was passionate about finding a way to repair brain functionality for patients who had suffered some sort of mental loss or trauma. While the Ibrahim sphere has changed the meaning of life and death in the verse, there are still serious consequences to both mental and physical injuries and afflictions. Do NPCs regen? Yes, they do. Why should players be treated differently from NPCs? They absolutely should not. 100%. And that's my issue with this is, the whole, people will say, well, it's a game. I don't give a shit. It's not meant to be, if it was a game like, traditional games, we wouldn't have all of this up here that we're reading right now. We wouldn't have Death of a Spaceman. We wouldn't have Regen if it was just a game. It's not meant to be played like it's just a game. That's what all this is about. And so, but that's why I think we need the robust revive mechanic, because we have this explanation in the Regen article, as well as talking about Death of a Spaceman, both in the article and from Richard Tyler themselves, where the idea is that we have advanced medical technology that can bring you back from, essentially from death or the brink of death without regen. And so if that's the case, why would you regen and take the hint to your IVS rather than be revived and healed when regen is prohibitively expensive and the Calliope machine is there? Why would regen ever be the better option? Why would you take one of your 9 lives for convenience rather than get treated and transported, especially where if you have all this, you've got trauma team, the paramedics and EMS all over the place that can heal you and get you going on scene, because even if you have a tier 1 injury, you can treat that on scene so you can still be capable to an extent after being revived. And then if when you're ready, you can make the trek to a hospital to get healed. It's not you don't have to go back now. It's you can go back when you're ready. Just know that you're going to have to manage your symptoms until then. And you didn't die. So why would you regen rather than revive, complete, paramed yourself, complete the mission, and then go to the hospital? It makes no sense. The instances where regen would be preferable in that situation are so slim that it wouldn't make sense for a manufacturer to include it in a tier 3 bed or even a tier 2 bed. They just wouldn't do it because they'd be like, why the fuck would you do that? That makes no sense. And especially with the added cost of trying to put it out that far. Like, if you know anything about the Industrial Revolution and the economics of scale, it makes zero sense. Yeah, and and that's the thing, is not everybody can regen, because regen is expensive, but even imprinting is costly. But it has saved a lot of lives by making imprinting more widely available, so that way people can imprint and have an imprint stored, so that way they could regen if need be. Because that's the thing, is you only the regen is only expensive if you actually die. But essentially making a save point is a good thing. The other thing is, and if you want to be conspiracy theorists about it, I think if I was going to make a conspiracy theory, I would say that the Imperator, what's her face, who made this, who authorized trillions of credits to make it publicly available and put out all this information to get people to imprint. Boy, what kind of scandal would it be if she had financial ties to the companies that make this technology, as well as the companies that do the servicing of you doing the making an imprint or going through regeneration. You need to regularly do an imprint. You need to update your imprint, otherwise your IVS will go down. Don't take the risk. Imprint on a regular basis. And every time you do it, you have to pull out your Mobi glass and swipe 5,000 UEC or something like that. And watch that company's stock go up. And boy, what if that's her golden parachute? Yeah. So, oh my gosh. Did I? I am a bad. I forgot another article. We've got even more. Let's see. So, hold on. We're gonna add this to the list real quick. It's this guy. How do I? Which jump point? It's February 2022. Okay, so subscribers. I forgot about that article. Let's see. Jump point. I missed one. February 2022. There we go. Let's see. Okay. Apologies. How dare I? Yeah, I totally agree. They need to go back to regen being at tier 1 beds, um, and imprinting at tier 1 and tier 2 beds, and um, obviously, that retaining it's the same. But I think that the big thing is being able to make an imprint and store it, and being able to update it remotely or create a new imprint. So that way you can update, you can have your imprint stored at any tier 1 facility, and or even move it, pay to transfer your imprint. Be like, you know what? I want to. I'm moving from Killian to Keel, and two different star systems, and my imprint is stored here. And so I'm going to create a new imprint, and I want to have it sent to this hospital in the Keel system. That should be a thing. And that way, if during transit something bad happens, you regen here instead of back at Killian and having to start all over again, because you have lossless transfer of your imprints. Um, but I think you should also be able to remotely update your imprint to keep your EVS from going down. In your absence. If you can't, make it. Whether you do it at a tier 1 or a tier 2. But a little, C8R bed or cutless red bed or a nurser bed, absolutely not. No. Yeah. Let's see. I'm sorry. Where was I? Oh, sorry. Here we go. So, while the Ibrahim sphere has changed the meaning of life and death in the verse, there are still serious consequences to both mental and physical injuries and afflictions. In order to benefit from an Ibrahim sphere, a person must have an imprint made. As a holistic record of an individual person, these imprints also register the body's age and pre-existing mental and physical trauma. So, as a person undergoes subsequent regenerations, they still suffer from all the normal consequences of aging, along with the degenerative changes that can accompany it, as well as suffering from additional complicating factors such as traumatic response echoes that can permanently alter an imprint and gradually lead to its degradation, only hastening the body's natural degeneration. The more you regenerate, the more it degrades, the faster it degrades. Not only that, but the people who don't imprint frequently enough may suffer gaps in their memory upon regenerating, as in the Hazy Days short story featured in February Jump Point, which we will read. As game development continues, we hope that we will be able to represent these side effects of the process in game. So lots of side effects, whether with cybernetic limbs or other physical indicators. Every regeneration brings you closer to suffering a permanent death, but fame and fortune are still out there for the taking. And that's the thing, is with the original death of a spaceman, he wanted you to have multiple deaths, multiple lives. Not 1,000, multiple lives. And by adding in this other, this other aspect of it, it allows you to have multiple lives on top of being able to survive horrific injuries, and still be revived and healed and such. And so you're getting even more lives. But I don't think that something that is, dozens, if not hundreds, is realistic. I think it needs to be a reasonable number. I don't think because I don't think we need to be having, it to the point where you have everybody, can die 100 times. I don't think that's believable within the lore that they've created. Let's see. So that was the last of. Yep. Okay. So the next lore article, or the next mention, is in the Lore Makers Community Questions from March 21st, 2023. So a little over a year ago. So the first question is drama and tension. How do you plan to introduce tension and suspense into the narrative of this universe? Everyone is functionally immortal. No one can die from anything but old age. How do you write about that? The answer: the opportunities to introduce drama and tension into the narrative of the universe are limitless. There's tension in what system lies on the other side of a newly discovered jump. There's drama in a Hurston hiding from their family that they fell in love with a member of the United Workers of Hurston. Ooh, scandalous. Death is fertile ground for drama and tension, but not the sole source. Also, I wouldn't classify regen tech as functional immortality. Here they are reiterating this. You're not going to get all these lives. It may currently feel that way in game because the mechanic hasn't been fully implemented, but the regen system should have plenty of interesting wrinkles that create tension. For example, catastrophic deaths may result in injuries or effects that stick with your character. The loss of a ship or a frantic race to retrieve a precious or valuable item following a death is another. Plus, there's always the chance that this death might be the final one and result in that character passing on their stuff to an heir, new character. Because the more you die, your IVS go down, chance that you can't regen go up. Since the full system isn't in game yet, it's worth reading both the original Death of a Spaceman post. They keep on referring back to it because it's not dead, and yet post, and the Lore Maker's Guide to Regeneration to better understand our goals. Within the lore, we've already explored drama and tensions around regen and death in posts like Far From Home, Regen Contemplation, which we have up here, Star Watch Bow 2.0 up here, and Crossroads, as well as the Jump Point articles that we'll read. Death won't be without consequence, tension, and drama in the game. It'll just be different than what we're used to. And then down here, we have effects of regen on society. Question. I'm curious to hear from the narrative team on the effects that regeneration, how you died will affect your IVS. So, like if your IVS started at 100 and you suffered a horrifically catastrophic, traumatic death, you could do another tier 1 imprint after regenerating, but you wouldn't be able to get back up to 100 again. Your new score would be 79 or something. So that's what will change, how it so again, Nursa commercial. Pretty sure all that qualifies. I'm curious to hear from the narrative team on the effects that regeneration has on a society. I was trying to think how such a fundamental shift would affect society, since many of our long-standing laws and morals would be deeply challenged by the fact that death is no longer final. Would execution as a punishment even exist? Would murder be as heavily punished as it is now? It would seem that in general, people would value life less, as death would not be final. Assuming a person imprinted before a dangerous mission, non-traumatic suicide, i.e. cyanide pill, would be a mostly viable means of escaping capture. High-risk economic activity would be seen as more viable. In fact, it's likely that crime would explode for a period, while society adjusts to the fact that being killed in the commission of a crime is no longer the end. Resources once considered too dangerous to extract would be actively sought out by those with the means to imprint regen. Acts what's considered extremely noble, i.e. captain going down with the ship, would be simply commonplace or even contractually required. Sorry, I know this has been kind of rambling, makes a lot of good points, but it's something I've been wondering about more and more. I'd love to hear the lore team's take on regeneration and what it would mean for society. Answer: we know this question comes around a lot, and it is of great interest to the community. The narrative team actually dedicated one of our recent lore jams to elaborate on the subject of this question. First, the death penalty. Need more water. First, the death penalty. This practice would be impacted by regeneration tech, but the death penalty itself has already been outlawed in the verse for hundreds of years. As for murder, the law has gone a simple route. It is the act of murder that is being punished. Whether someone successfully regenerates or not, the prosecution is the same. Again, which is, people being murder hobos, I got bad news for you. Because the regen lore explains why A, you're still going to get charged with murder, and B, you're doing so in a system without comm relays or law enforcement means that it will still get reported. That they've lorified it to gamify it to make it so it's still a thing. Now, if you don't kill them and you just leave them there, it will take them longer to report the crime and give you more time to get away, or if you capture them. Just saying, the costs of being a murder hobo will be higher than the costs of not murder hoboing. Let's see. Second, using regeneration as an out. It's not unheard of for criminals to use regenerating to escape a disadvantageous situation, but it's not all that common either. It's important to remember that regeneration is not pleasant. Even if death itself is painless, regeneration is not. So you're not just waking up from regeneration and you're like, boy, that was a good nap. I'm going to go complete this mission. No, it is an unpleasant process. You will have essentially a convalescence period afterwards. You're not just jumping right back into the action. Temporarily in the alpha state, yeah, but it's not meant to be that way. And then there's all the other side effects like scarring, loss of memory, or being unable to lose used limbs you've previously lost even after they've been regenerated because the loss has deeply imprinted itself upon your consciousness. Using regeneration as an out is an extreme action, like sawing off your arm when you've been pinned under a rock. Even if it's your only way out, how many people would actually go through with it? Again, nurse a commercial. These two things are like oil in water. The guy is having countless traumatic deaths and regenerating on a tier 3 bed and gets back up and goes into combat and is running and sliding and shooting and climbing a ladder, and kicking a dude off a tower and all that stuff. And it's like, again, narrative team saying, am I a joke to you? Does the marketing team and the capture team who do these commercials know that the narrative team exists? Because there is no way what is occurring in that commercial should be occurring with what we know about regen. No way. But they're marketing it and they're using it to sell a vehicle. And again, it's not the tier 3 medbed respawn, in the alpha thing that bothers me. I think it's fine in the alpha. It's you are selling a ship with these ideas to people who have not read this and don't understand these things. And so you're either going to cave to their demands when you're like, you didn't tell me, because you didn't read this, or you took their money with false advertising. And false advertising on a scale that we have not seen in the Star Citizen community. Like, the people have griped about the Crusader ship, and false advertising regarding its firepower and such, and it's a capital killer, blah blah blah. I should be able to launch, that doesn't hold a friggin' candle to this at all. This is beyond the pale compared to every other flub that they've done. Ion Infernal, thank you, Blizzrad. Yeah. He's in a great mental state. He's regened 1,000 times, and continues to do these missions, but like, what? I can't even at this point. That's why there are grunts and pokes. Yeah. And again, using regeneration as an out is an extreme action, like sawing off your arm when you've been pinned under a rock. Even if it's your only way out, how many people would actually go through with it? Exactly. So people wouldn't make that choice to use a tier 3 bed, or they wouldn't do it often enough that a manufacturer would include that technology into that bed, because they're like, no one's going to do this. No, they'll hit themselves with a med pen and they'll treat their symptoms and they'll call an ambulance to take them back to the hospital. No one's going to do that, with the risks of doing so in a tier 3 bed. So it just wouldn't exist. It does not make sense. Same with even a tier 2. You're like, oh, well, wait a minute. There's a tier 1 bed in a major hospital, 10, 15 minutes away. Why would I Why would I regen here? Why would that even be a thing? Well, because convenience. But you're gonna take that much of a hit off your IVS and your essentially your number of lives just to save a little bit of time and gas? No. People don't do that in real life. Like, what makes you think they would do that? That in the game they would do that. So what I'm getting is that the vid made tier 3 revive canon because they probably get sued for false promises. I don't know. I don't know. I just I can't make sense of it. It's just that bad. Yeah. So third, the broader cultural impact. It's understandable that we want to try and explain the risk-embracing behavior of players as an indication of the broader cultural impact of regeneration. But people don't drive more recklessly because they have seatbelts. A lot of the repercussions and limitations of regeneration aren't represented. Again, holy shit balls. That stupid fucking commercial. A lot of the repercussions and limitations of regeneration aren't represented in the current iteration of the game, so while some individuals might be more reckless, it's likely they were predisposed for that behavior regardless of the wide availability of regeneration. For companies and organizations like the UEE, regeneration is still a costly process, and it's almost always either cheaper, easier, and or simply more moral. Well, that's not what we're talking about here because we have Blizzrad to focus on saving lives than it is to rely on this imperfect technology. That's how costly it is. For companies and organizations like the UEE, the mega government that is controls all of humanity, regeneration is still a costly process. It's so costly that the UEE military has a major hospital facility multiple jumps away from the Vandal front lines in order where they take their injured soldiers, sailors, and Marines rather than regen them. They would rather transport people halfway across UEE space to treat them and convalesce them than heal them. Like that's how expensive it is. The UEE says it's that expensive. So dude trying to get some shit some little little USB drive in Pyro is regenning constantly in a tier 3 bed with all these negative things and somehow has the money for it. But the UEE is like, nah, we're going to, I'm not going to, I know you're effed up and we could just regen you in that bed right over there. But instead, we're going to fly you halfway across the universe. The UEE should just... Oh my gosh, Omega Black. Oh geez, that's the best. That's the best line. We've had a lot of good one-liners this evening, but that one takes the cake. Why doesn't the UE just spend $55 and build a vast armada of nurses? Yeah. Yeah, how many times will the UE revive a Gomer pile until they nope out? Exactly. I'm gonna. Oh jeez. Good stuff. Thank you, Blizzrad. I will pin those in a moment. But yeah, regeneration for companies and organizations like the UE, regeneration is still a costly process, and it's almost always either cheaper, easier, or simply more moral to focus on saving lives than it is to rely on this imperfect technology. Regeneration is a huge topic that we could explore for days on end. Well, we're doing it for several hours. It is definitely part of the fabric of what makes Star Citizen unique as a science fiction setting, at least until they release the NERSA and validate it all. Don't forget that in the lore of the universe, regeneration is still very new technology. It was only released publicly in the UEE a few years ago, so the full extent of its impact hasn't been seen yet. So, next Lore Makers community questions. This one, September 19th, 2023. So let's see. Yeah, it's just this one. How human is a regen? Somebody who's regened. The Bioticore Regen Serum is used as a base material for the bioprinting of bodies. My question is, how human is a regenerated person? I don't mean from a philosophical point of view, but rather how well can the serum mimic real blood, bone, and tissue? Will a regenerated person feel the difference? From a physiological perspective, regen humans are 100% human with real cells, tissues, organs, and so forth. There's no placeholder goo or tech replicating aspects or functions of the body. It's a real body. We are literally the ship of Theseus. Socially confused. The plus side of the NERSA controversy is that we get a break from the Master Modes controversy. You guys are on a roll tonight. Oh my gosh. The serum works with the Ibrahim sphere to regen a human or alien that's physiologically identical to their imprint, including imperfections and life's wear and tear. Now, whether a regen person can feel the difference between their previous and regen body is a question that veers into the philosophical, but we have already called out that phantom pain is possible. The regen serum creates the physical aspects of the body, but it's the Ibrahim sphere that captures and transfers a person's memories, personality, and other intangibles. Imprinting creates a link or echo that can pick up and register traumatic events that occur to the host body. So someone regenning after an accident might feel phantom pain in a leg that was crushed, or as the physical pain and psychological fear of that experience will echo to the imprint and impact their regeneration. This mind-body connection was important from a design perspective, so characters would age and face the consequences of their actions. While the psychological aspect of how someone feels after regen aren't represented in the game design, the situation creates some interesting role-playing situations for players and dramatic possibilities within the lore, one of which was already explored in the short story Hazy Days. The thing is, I always found CIG annoying when they make a change like this. I like master modes. But it just surprised me when there is this, we made this change to add in this. Yeah, I didn't like the tier 3 medbed change on the face of it at the beginning. That was bad to me. I didn't like giving tier 2 beds regen, but I always assumed that it was just we're going to give them a respawn mechanic because it's the opposite of the game, so I was fine with it. But I always said, I was like, no, in the long term, we don't need that. We need good revive. And then the NERSA commercial came out, and I was like, what? Excuse me? What the fuck was that? Because I had read all of this numerous times because I find it interesting and fascinating. And so I saw that commercial, and I just about had a stroke. Yeah. So this is the last mention in Lore Makers community questions. And this one's kind of short, and then we'll get into the lore posts. Yeah. I mean, cinematically, the NERSA vid was really well done. Yes, absolutely. I 100% agree. The skills of the cinematics team, I think that's who does the commercials and such, over at CIG are, in my opinion, unparalleled. And that's not just, oh, you're a CIG fanboy. No, I think they do just really amazing work. I mean, the game itself gives them great tools, but I think that they are extremely skilled. And it's why I always use Star Citizen cinematics in my short form videos and their own art, because I don't think that there's no way I could do anything do better. You want to make my own videos with getting my own stuff captured in game. I would much rather use what they use to represent the game than anything else. But the implications of that video, oh boy, yeah. So it's a weekend, so we'll see how they react. Nerd alert. Death of a Spaceman and its impact on the universe. Question: is it common in the SC universe for people to swap their physical sex? What I've understood about the way Death of a Spaceman and Regen are supposed to work suggests that this would be pretty trivial to do. Is it, and is it common? Or does that maybe cause a problem when it comes to legal issues? How is identity legally established? If you have a tailored appearance with DNA that's not identical to your own, how is it established that when you regen that you're legally the same person? Or another way of putting it, how closely linked is biology to identity? Yeah, they have come a long way. Yeah, the old Republic cinematics were really great too for their time. I haven't seen any of the newer ones, but I always enjoyed those. It's definitely what sold me on the game when I used to play it. But yeah, they have. I mean, CIG has always been good for their time, and they've just continued to get better, and it's really impressive. They know their tools and they know their audience. Answer: recent advances in medical science in the 30th century have made altering one's complete physical appearance a lot more commonplace. For example, Bioticore's cutting-edge Calliope system allows people to safely and quickly undergo massive structural bone and tissue changes that would have previously taken a team of surgeons multiple operations to perform, along with a long convalescence period. Regardless of how many changes someone undergoes, there would still be inherent markers that would remain consistent by which deep scans would be able to identify someone in order to maintain a consistent and verifiable ID record. Please note that this is different from regeneration, the process by which a new body is recreated from an Ibrahim sphere imprint. These cannot be manipulated and are accurate to your last imprint scan. For example, if someone were to make an imprint, make alterations via the Calliope system, then experience a fatal accident, their regenerated body would look like they did before they made the alterations, barring, of course, any physical damage imparted by traumatic echoes in the imprint as the result of death. So, if you change the idea is that you'd be able to use the Calliope machine in game to change your appearance, but it would cost money. If you regen, you just threw away that money. Another, that's a low level thing, but another cost. Dodge the lightning rod of 2024. Yeah. Okay, so that's it for the Lore Makers community questions mentions of regen. Let's look at these jump point articles. So let's see how long. Yeah, it's just 2 pages. So we'll read the whole thing. I've read this. It's just been a while. So this is Hazy Days, and this was the February 22 jump point. And if you ever want to read this and you don't have subscriber access, hop in my Discord. Let me know. I will always be happy to upload it for you. I share that privilege that I pay for because I think the jump points are great. They're always good reading. There's lots of good information in them, and there's no point in them being hid behind a paywall, in my opinion. It's one thing to fund the creation of Jump Point with subscriber money, but I don't think that we should hide it behind a paywall. A sudden uprush dispels the dark. Pernell Arai opens his eyes to find himself in a bright, sterile medical facility. There you are, Mr. Arai. Where am I? It's okay. You are in Orison. Visit Orison. Looks like your regen was successful. How are you feeling? It looks like it was successful because it's not perfect technology, and there's always a chance that it won't be. But this is at the I forget the name of the hospital in Orson, where they have a tier 1 bed. Purnell draws a few deep breaths, then wiggles his fingers and toes. A little sore. What happened to me? Afraid I can't help you with that. You suffered a traumatic injury, though. Don't think you suffered a traumatic injury, though. Don't think there'll be any scarring, though, so you're lucky there. What's the last thing you remember? Parnell's memories come flooding back. He's dancing with Sergei. He's on a beach in Castle, basking in the glow of Gauss's binary stars. He's a kid struggling to steady a gun to shoot cans in an abandoned building on the outskirts of Archibald Station. Your brain activity looks normal, at least, the doctor says while navigating screens on her datapad. Sorry, I'm remembering things. It's just a lot at once. All good. I asked because your last imprint was quite a while ago. If you don't imprint frequently, your short-term memory can be quite a bit hazy. You know that, right, Mr. Arai? Mr. Arai? Purnell shifts his eyes from the window's stunning vista over Orison back to the doctor and then nods knowingly. Sorry, still settling back in. Totally understandable. Well, all your vitals look good, so you're free to leave. Obviously, take a little time for yourself and maybe imprint a bit more frequently. Might make things easier next time. Purnell thanks the doctor, then leaves the hospital in a daze, wearing the clothing provided to him. Wind whips around the Cloudview Center platform, chilling him to the bone through the thin material. Still, he stops to enjoy the sunset spreading vibrant color across the sky. He even leans over the railing ever so slightly to take in the cloud bank below. A sudden rush of vertigo overcomes him. Purnell takes a quick step back, then wonders if that's how he died, like a fool falling off an Orison platform. He sits on a nearby bench and closes his eyes. No recent memories surface. Eventually, Purnell stands and walks across the platform, knowing full well that things could be worse. At least he remembers the location of his hab. Back at his green circle hab, Purnell opens a closet to change. For a second, he's shocked to see his favorite helmet missing. Of course, he was wearing it when... He pauses again, hoping something will come back, but nothing does. Instead, he recalls how he quit tailing a target in the back streets of Fujin City, which is on Saisei, in Centauri, the Centauri system, I believe, to buy the helmet from a pop-up stall. Something about it suited him and it had served him well, keeping him safe. That is, until now. Only later did he discover it was an early and exceedingly rare CC's conversion helmet, one that is immensely valuable to him in many ways and now potentially gone forever. Orison General, thank you so much. Purnell pops open his Moby and scrolls through his inventory. His heart sinks when he sees what he's missing. It must have been a big op if he took so much stuff. There's enough of his gear still in storage, but he feels so disconnected from his collection of odds and ends that it's like browsing through someone else's closet. He can't remember the last time he wore half this stuff. Shoving that dull ache of loss aside, Purnell grabs his backup undersuit and stuffs his right leg into it, praying it still fits. Circling above the surface, it doesn't take long before Purnell spots the bunker's support structures. He slows the ship and adjusts course to keep his distance, unable to trust his memory enough to know whether or not the spot has turrets. It all looks vaguely familiar, and the more he circles, the more he feels like he's been here. If he had to bet, this is where he died. Each time I hear the Centauri system, I keep thinking of aliens that have the fan-shaped hairdos from Babylon 5. Purnell found the spot after checking his Moby for his recent job history. His last gig brought him to this bunker, which would explain why he took so much stuff. In the past, he would have assembled one, maybe two people for something like this, but Purnell started doing jobs like this alone since coming to Crusader. At first, it was out of necessity since he didn't trust anyone, but as his confidence grew and the credits rolled in thanks to him keeping 100% of the payout, he soon found himself scrolling his Moby specifically for similar gigs. Plus, if Purnell was being honest, he found the rush of facing down a hive of outlaws all on his lonesome to be incredible. Now, contemplating landing back at the bunker where he died, Purnell wonders about the wisdom of not bringing backup. He's already at a disadvantage wearing his secondhand gear with some asshole in the bunker probably getting ready to shoot him with the carefully calibrated weapons they've undoubtedly looted from his body. Pardon me. But I'm so friendly. Friendly outlaws, yeah. Slowing the ship's thrusters, he spots a turret and sets his sight on it. He primes a missile and punches it, and pushes in. To his surprise, the turret doesn't care. He takes his finger off the trigger and buzzes the bunker. When that doesn't prompt a response from the turret either, he loops back and lands without incident. Glad it didn't cost him any munitions to set down near the entrance. Sound familiar, anyone? He climbs out of the ship, quickly double-checks his unfamiliar gear, and hustles towards the bunker. The outer doors are already breached and slightly open, showing a sliver of the elevator inside. He unholsters his pistol, a near-pristine Arclight 2, and enters cautiously. A few steps inside, a hail of bullets strike his ship. Purnell spins to see that the nearby turret is now very active. His ship's shields flare for a moment before they blink out, and he barely has time to avert his eyes as an explosion sends ship debris flying across the landing pad. Job done, the turret returns to rest. For a second, Purnell feels woozy and steadies himself against the door. All of these symptoms continuing on all the way back to the bunker. Feeling dizzy, having pain, probably vision changes, and you don't know when it's going to come in. It could randomly happen as you run in there and you start taking rounds, all because you regened instead of just, calling, doing the whole downed and revive and, getting retrieved. When it passes, he takes a second to contemplate his next step, activates his Moby, and sends out an emergency beacon. Then he collects himself and steps onto the elevator. Certain that it will take a while for a ride to arrive, and they didn't come all this way to not get his helmet. Yeah, players shouldn't skip this. Absolutely not. Once inside, Purnell gets deja vu. He knows a lot of the prefab bunkers around Crusader were built using the same modular design, but this one feels strangely familiar. He creeps in quick and quiet, then peers around a corner to see a grenade coming his way. Instinctively, Purnell rolls forward and takes cover behind a stack of crates. The blast knocks a few atop him, which he quickly kicks away and starts firing. A figure falls and Purnell rolls through the swirling smoke to a new position. He holsters the pistol, unslings his P4 AR rifle, fires, and watches another figure fall. He pushes forward, drawing fire from another concealed position. Purnell weaves behind cover until he's flanking the remaining combatant. He swings his rifle up and focuses on a hazy shadow within the columns of smoke and squeezes the trigger until the figure falls. Purnell takes a moment and lets everything settle. His ears are still ringing from the initial grenade blast, but the bunker is otherwise quiet. He gets up and crosses to the last figure he shot. His heart sinks when he sees what's left of the distinct shape of his helmet, now bullet-ridden and modded to match the gang's colors. Something about seeing those colors makes memories flood Purnell's mind. He looks around the space and it all comes back, including the fact that there were 4 of them last time. Purnell hears footsteps behind him, and before he can raise his rifle, everything goes black. Oof. Now, as a player, yeah, you'd remember that. You're not gonna, you personally, you're not gonna forget. But the other symptoms, the pain, the traumatic response echoes, dizziness, vision changes, randomly coming on, for a period of time after you regen, all of that makes it so the Nursa commercial. What? No, absolutely not. All right, let's read the next one. So this one is from the most recent jump point, just in April. And this one's fairly short, so we'll read this. It only mentions regen at the end, but it's important, and I think it's good reading. So, Weekly Star, Klesher Confessions by Hedda Parsons, an exclusive interview with the Shot to the Heart killer. Convicted killers and star-crossed lovers Andalyn Melvin and Nesta Kwan first met on a landing pad in Lorville. He was earning credits hauling heavy weapons from remote distribution facilities to a central processing center, while she toiled away doing warehouse administration, logging each of Andalyn's deliveries. And though it wasn't love at first light, Andalyn later claimed he instantly felt an uncommon warmth beneath Nesta's stone-faced professional demeanor. Every time I saw her, we'd chat for a few moments about Sadaball scores or that day's pollution levels. You know, stuff that doesn't really matter, says Andalyn over a monitored comm from his cell on Aberdeen. We were friendly but not close, if that makes sense. But that all changed when I saw her at that screening of Shot to the Heart. Think that was the first time I ever saw her smile. Andalyn and Nesta both lived in Lorville's workers' district, and one night found themselves in the same courtyard where someone was projecting Shot to the Heart onto a wall for all to enjoy. The hit vid tells the story of two lovers fighting their way through gangs, jealous ex-lovers, and a corrupt advocacy agent in an attempt to create a new life for themselves. After the screening, Andalyn and Nesta connected and aimlessly strolled the workers' district for hours, sharing their hopes, dreams, and desire to pay off the onerous long-term worker contracts that both had signed. Nesta was optimistic that she would free herself ahead of schedule, but Andalyn had run the numbers and was more realistic about how long it would take to get out from under Hurston's thumb. According to Andalyn, I remember breaking down the specifics to her, and this brief moment of anger flashed across her face. Then she simply said we should do something about it. At first, it was all talk between the blossoming lovers, but a plan slowly came together. On April 11th, 2953, Andalyn received a work order to deliver a high-value shipment to Nesta's facility. He calmed her their arranged signal, Shot to the Heart, sealing their fate and forever associating them with the vid that brought them together. I tried to act like it was just a normal day, recalls Andalyn, but my nerves got the better of me. Spilled a whole pot of coffee at the distro office and nearly scraped off a wing pulling out of the hangar. When my boss asked me if I was feeling all right, I almost called the whole thing off. The only thing that kept me on course was the thought of Nesta depending on me. Luckily, I managed to make it to her without anything else happening. As soon as I arrived, she falsified the records, marking the whole shipment as already being delivered, and then took her break. Thought my heart was going to leap out of my chest when she asked for permission to come aboard. When she was with me, sitting co-pilot, everything felt right, like we were free and clear and everything was going to work out. That feeling of ill-gotten freedom wouldn't last long. After breaking up Atmo, I wonder if can I make this full screen? Menu. Oh well, fuck it. I'll just keep reading. It's big enough. That feeling of ill-gotten freedom wouldn't last long. After breaking Atmo, Andalyn spun up the quantum drive and directed the ship to an outpost on Aberdeen. There they planned to meet someone who promised clean reg tags and the names of contacts in Pyro willing to buy their haul of stolen weapons. I bloody well knew something was wrong the second we stepped off that ship. Half the landing pad's lights were off, and our contact was just waiting in the shadows, says Andalyn. I should have listened to my gut and pulled Nesta right back onto that ship. Guess that's why I'm here now. Once Andalyn and Nesta were clear of the ship, the figure stepped from the shadows with the gun raised. Jelani Konechny identified herself as an advocacy agent and told the two to raise their hands above their heads. Andalyn complied, pardon me, but Nesta only pretended to. Instead, she quickly drew her arc-light pistol and pulled the trigger. Agent Konechny returned fire. Looking back on that moment now is hard. For so many reasons, remembers Andalyn. When it all went down, I wasn't thinking at all about the standoff at the end of Shot to the Heart. But I see why people think that's what inspired us. Honestly, I don't know what was going through Nesta's mind when she pulled that gun, and I guess I never will. Unlike the lovers from the vid, Andalyn and Nesta would not escape unscathed. Following the brief volley of fire, Nesta and Agent Konechny both fell to the ground. Andolin rushed to Nesta to see a bullet hole through the center of her helmet's visor. The realization of what happened overwhelmed Andolin, who then noticed Agent Konechny struggling to pull out a bedpan. I don't know what came over me. I grabbed Nesta's gun, aimed it at the person who killed the love of my life, and pulled the trigger until the mag was empty. There was absolutely no thought behind any of it, only grief. I swear I didn't even hear the advocacy reinforcements show up until they shot me. Andolin took several bullets to the back and right shoulder, but survived. Today he is slowly whittling down a lengthy sentence at Klesher Rehabilitation Facility on Aberdeen. Agent Konechny died from her wounds, but regened with enough memories of the incident to testify against Andolin in court. There we go. Oh, wait, just what just happened? Hey, oh, we just got rated. Sorry, I was reading chat and I didn't see that. Pardon me. Oh, pardon me. Red Monster SC rating with 92 viewers. Thank you so much for the raid, Red Monster. Good to see you, buddy. Really appreciate the support and for sending some love my way. Hope you had a good stream and hope all your viewers are having a good night. Akira Kun with the raid chat. Thanks for saying hi. So this evening we are going through the lore surrounding regeneration, and let me tell you, folks, there is a lot, and I thought it would be good to cover it all, to provide accurate context for why a lot of people are upset regarding the NERSA commercial for the Ursa Medevac. And why a lot of people are concerned about potential changes to Death of a Spaceman and Regeneration and medical gameplay, because there is a lot of regen lore. It's not just the original Lore Maker's Guide. If you can see all the tabs up here, it's the Lore Maker's Guide, 5 mentions and Lore Maker's community questions, 3 different lore posts on the website, as well as in 2 jump points. There is a lot of context that most people have never read, most people don't know anything about, especially in the greater context of Death of a Spaceman. You're doing some salvage. How is salvage going? Were you salvaging in a reclaimer or in a vulture? Because I've been hearing that there's some issues with this patch and salvage. I hope it's going well. I don't know if they've been able to iron out more of those issues with the .1 release. I was just hearing during EPTU for 323, and then when it went live, that there's been some issues and been some changes. I haven't had a chance to try it for myself, but I'll be interested to hear everybody's feedback in the coming weeks. Because I know the Reclaimer has some issues, but I know it also got some changes. But bad news for mining if Red Monster SC is not mining. Yeah. So let's finish reading that lore bit. Let's see. Here we are. So this is how they're lorifying the idea that if you commit murder, you're a murder hobo and you just go around killing everybody, and it's like, well, I clear the comm relay, so I won't have a crime stat. Well, if you kill the person and they regen, they report the crime and testify against you, and that's how you get a crime stat. That's how you get the reputation hit, and that's how they'll gamify it. Even if you're in Pyro, you may not get a crime stat, but you will get the reputation hit because the person can potentially or very likely regen and report the crime or report what happened to them to to the gang that they're a part of. So I don't foresee you being able to be sneaky and do things under the radar, or at least not do them easily. It will probably require a lot more work. I think this is a good lore to help explain, along with the whole murder being frowned upon thing, but also to to say that this is how we're going to gamify this, so that way, to further disincentivize being a murder hobo and just be a pirate or take people prisoner and shit. Yeah, Red Monster SC, I totally hear that. It especially, you don't want to just do mining all the time, or whatever it is. it gets kind of tedious and boring, even if that's something you're really good at. You do, like to mix it up a little bit. And salvage, especially with other people, is a really, I mean, all industry gameplay is, but salvage is a really fun mechanic to do with other people, and it's gotten a lot of depth to it. And um, I I'm looking forward to having a little bit more balance where it makes sense for salvagers to take their time and do the whole waste no part of the animal. Um, Jay Calvin says, I do bounty hunting and investigation. I love the investigation missions. Those are my favorite. I like to go searching for clues and find the bodies and recover this and that. That's my jam, and I hope those missions, especially I like going wreck diving, especially in space, and with the new EVA, as well as the zero G push pull coming and all that. I want to see those missions get updated because that is my favorite, some of my favorite gameplay. Going wreck diving, whether you're parkouring across a wreck on a planet or EVAing through a wreck in space, investigating what happened. So yeah. Angela took several bullets to the back and right shoulder, but survived. Today is slowly whittling down, several bullets and survived. Slowly whittling down a lengthy sentence at Klesher. Agent Konechny died from her wounds, but regened with enough memories of the incident to testify against Andolin in court. Lacking the funds to afford an imprint. Nesta couldn't even afford an imprint. They lived and worked on Hurston, but she couldn't even afford to imprint. So not only is regen expensive, but even imprinting is costly. But regeneration is so prohibitively expensive, it's even the UEE avoids it. It's like a last ditch thing. That's how expensive, it is for the overarching government that controls all of humanity. But even imprinting is expensive, and you're encouraged to imprint frequently to help reduce the likelihood of negative symptoms post regeneration. Lacking the funds to avoid an imprint, Nesta died in Andolin's arms on that landing pad. When asked if Andolin regrets ever meeting Nesta, he sits in quiet contemplation for a while. His eyes waver between joy and sadness. I am ashamed of what I did, and not a day goes by that I don't wish things would have turned out differently. But I honestly don't know if my life is any worse because of this. Living and working on Lorville feels like there's weight on your chest. It makes getting up every morning a struggle. And yeah, I feel like the same thing here. I feel that same thing here in Klesher, but at least I've had those few beautiful moments together with Nesta, and never having her in my life feels like a worse fate. Cool lore. All right, so we've got a little bit more lore to read, and I'm not going to read the entire article for these ones, because a lot of especially for this one, a lot of the article isn't really relevant to regen. It's just musings, but I do feel like they're good and interesting reading. But I want to skip to the more pertinent to regen part. And this is just going to provide a little bit of context. Plus, this is written, it involves one of my favorite in-lore locations. But this is Far From Home. And this is a series that is written by this character. Pardon me. Oh, geez. I hold my breath to get rid of my hiccups. But this series is written by a character called Old Jagger, who's just like a sort of a loner who's always on the drift on his ship out in space. And he just writes these musings, and they're pretty interesting. But let's read about the regen part. So down here at the end, let's see. So when I mentioned my, here, I want to start here. Gonna guess the faulty circuit stems from my trip to Tyrol, which is a really cool system. If you haven't checked out the lore about Tyrol, check it out. Visited a friend I hadn't seen in ages since she retired to Haven, actually. I'll just call her Iggy, even though I know she hates that nickname. Anyways, Iggy was a mentor of mine. We stayed in touch over the years, but I've always been averse to visiting Tyrol due to, the chance of the system going supernova, or that I might step outside without the right protective gear and melt or something. Why anyone lives there is beyond me, but when an old friend asks you to come see them, what else are you going to say besides, how many bottles of mezcal should I bring? Nice. A neat trick for stopping hiccups is to say in your mind catfish. I have no idea as to why that works. I will try that next time. Thanks for the tip. So Iggy gave me the lay of the land regarding local gangs and advice on what route and time to approach Haven would be best. And there's crime there, but Haven is this really interesting location. And again, go read about it. I can't wait to visit it in the verse. If you've never been, well, I can't in good conscience recommend that you visit unless you know what you're getting into, but I've never been to any place like it. Most of Haven is built into this massive canyon wall to limit exposure to the stars. Wasn't until I was sitting in Iggy's living room halfway through a bottle of Souls and watching the sun's rays slowly shift across the canyon walls that I came to appreciate the place. When I mentioned, and that's where I want to eventually have an apartment to have, like that's where I want my home base to be. When I mentioned my newfound appreciation for Haven, Iggy smiled with tears filling her eyes. That's when she revealed something that I never ever expected to hear. She died recently. Out of respect for my friend, I won't get into specifics, but she still does hauls from time to time to keep food on the table, and a recent one went terribly, terribly wrong. She described waking up in a hospital not only knowing she died, but feeling the after effects of it too. Again, mentioning the after effects, and that there are symptoms associated with it. Iggy and I talked about her experience for hours. Between the topic and the second bottle of Souls, we soon found ourselves deep into a philosophical debate about the new regen tech and how it's going to change humanity. Don't know exactly how, but it feels like life's never going to be quite the same. I mean, I've already had a full-on conversation with someone who died. I'm sure many of you out there have too, or maybe even that person, maybe even been that person back from the dead. Before we knew it, Tyrol's suns were rising again. We talked away the entire night, and I was absolutely exhausted. I slept away most of the day. Then Iggy took me on a little tour of Haven. We spent time with a few of her friends, and I got to see the life she's built for herself. We even walked by a low-rent regen station that looked like it was built by someone blindfolded. Haven is like the only landing zone in Tyrol. And so it makes sense for there to be I would say a tier 1 bed, a low rent tier 1 bed and regen station there. I don't think it should be a tier 3 or tier 2 bed, and I think that, you should have a better quality regen experience regenning at a tier 1 bed at Brentworth Care Center on Microtech than you should at the low rent regen station, in the local little hospital in Haven. In a backwater, crime-ridden system. When we got back to Iggy's place, she opened another bottle and revealed why she'd asked me to visit. She wanted me and Shauna to have the classic Juno Starwork power plant she'd been using and tinkering with for ages. She explained that she was officially hanging up her hauling cap and knew we'd put it to good use. Oh yeah, Jagger's a hauler, by the way. And so he writes these things while he's out in the black on these long hauls. He's essentially a long haul trucker. Gotta say, I was extremely moved. Before I could find the right words to thank her, she told me she'd had one last piece of advice to pass along: to get a good imprint of myself made as soon as possible, because life's worth the price. She knew I hadn't gotten one yet and hoped her experience would convince me otherwise. I explained my personal aversion to the tech and how it felt like it made life less, well, for lack of a better word, precious. For years, I've been traveling the Empire to take in as much of it as possible. Every journey felt important. Every destination reached was worth celebrating because I was never sure I'd reach it or ever see it again. I know it seems like you lose. I don't know. It seems like you lose the fun of taking risk, knowing that there's a backup version of myself waiting in the wings. And a player can make that choice, to not do an imprint, to play the game on hard mode. Especially because we do still have high grade medical technology where regen should be a rare occurrence, unless you die from absolutely catastrophic death, where you can't be regened. Let's see. Where was I? Plus, at this age, it ain't like the process will take away all the aches and pains. In fact, seeing Iggy struggle with some of the physical trauma from her incident only soured me on it more. You're going to have trauma. You have these echoes. When I mentioned that to Iggy, she told me the pain from the new scars was worth it to see me one last time. That sure shut me up good and quick. On long travel bounties, my real life girlfriend and co-streamer want to do blogs of our investigations or bounties to make a like the PU series that usually started with the office door. Oh, interesting. That'd be really cool. That'd be good reading. Iggy and I spent the next day with Shauna. Shauna's the name of his ship. Installing the power plant. If you think I'm thorough and meticulous with my equipment, you should see Iggy. She shared this massive file with me, tracking every issue she'd ever had with it and the corresponding fix. As we were finishing up, she turned to me and said, "Would have hated to see this go to anyone else." Shauna and I left Haven the next day. Before going, I gave Iggy a big hug. Told her I'd stay in touch and swing by again soon for another drink, but she just waved me off. Deep down, we both knew this was goodbye, so she left me with one last thought to chew on. The fragility of life doesn't make it precious. The willingness to live it does. That thought's still with me, rattling around in my head, just as I'm sure Iggy hoped. If you're wondering, I haven't gotten an imprint yet. Almost did, though, just the other day. I made this delivery to an R&R and came across a brand spanking new regen station. And R&R could be a low Earth orbit one, that's a major station, in a system without, a city, or an otherwise hospital. But I don't feel like regen should be at every, station in Stanton. I think it should be reserved for hospitals, but I think that hospitals can be at landing zones, landing zones, major points of interest, specific stations or towns or even asteroid facilities, but not every single R&R, every single gas station across the verse. That's silly. Brand spanking new regen station. Don't know how long I was standing there thinking about Iggy, but it was long enough for an employee to come out and check on me. Before he could finish his spiel about why his doodad was better than that doodad, I told him I wasn't interested, but the tech had already made my life better. Poor kid looked confused as hell as I walked away. Gotta admit, I feel the same way. I see the benefits, and maybe someday I'll get one, but for now, I'm gonna continue living this life like it's the only one I got. Beeping. Damn. Thought I'd found a nice spot to drift the night away, but there's a bit more activity around here than expected. Hate to sign off, but I got to find someplace a little quieter before I run into any trouble. This is old Jagger signing off somewhere far from home. So, Star Watch Bo 2.0. I'm not going to read through this whole one. I'm just going to give you the gist of it. But basically, there's a lot of legal implications in that for regeneration in that you, by regenerating and dying, it doesn't get you out of contracts. So if you take a contract and you regenerate during the course of that contract, it doesn't necessarily void that contract. It's why Hurston will pay to have their employees have an imprint, or at least certain employees have an imprint, in order to hold them to their contracts. So that way they don't lose them and can keep them in their employ if they die, and regenerate. It's not like you can, oh, well, sorry I died. Guess I'm getting out of this contract. Goodbye. That's what this is all about. But it's secondary to this actor taking some extreme measures to do some method acting to learn about the roles, in which he regened several times preparing for different roles, where he actually died. But because he's uber rich, he can use a tier 1 bed and preserve his IVS score. But yeah, there are these the claims were made that because he regened, he's not the same actor anymore, and we can void his contract. And it turns out that's not necessarily the case. Crossroads, and this one is, if you haven't read this one's really cool because it involves a Tavaran, and there's a bit of a twist at the end. But we're gonna read this last little bit because this is specifically about regen, and then I have to call it a night because it's almost midnight here, and we've been streaming for 3.5 hours. But that's how much lore there is for regen, and there's so much to talk about with regen and Death of a Spaceman. So at the end, Kren nodded and stayed there, watching as Jorg Tala died. Spoiler alert, by the way. Sorry. Kren retrieved his Bakor and gave the hunter one last look. He knew Jorg would be back. One of the benefits of the lawful life was an easier time regenerating, in that you have more access to places where you can regen, which makes sense. Which is why I don't think you should be able to regen at every tier 2 bed, and you shouldn't have a regen bed at every station across the verse, because otherwise you've got a dozen plus places to regen in Pyro. It makes no sense. Well, easier in that you wouldn't be arrested right when you woke up, because that's the thing is, you shouldn't have regen, easy access to regen, for all these criminals in these pirate systems. Yeah, it should be available, but not readily available, and not on every tier 2 bed in every station. Most of these beds would be confined to hospitals and more reputable facilities. But he goes on. The headaches were the same no matter what. Kren caught himself hoping Jorg's regeneration was painless and stopped mid-thought, surprised by his own sentimentality. So basically he's saying even though this bounty hunter is going to die, he knows that the bounty hunter is going to be after him again because he's going to regen, because he has the means to regen because he's on the right side of the law and he has more money. But he also knows that he's going to have to deal with the symptoms, the headaches and whatever else. Which is another reason why the whole Nursa commercial is just silly. It's just silly. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and switch screens, and we will call it a night. I forgot to ask you guys earlier when I switched screens, but did the transition sound play for you guys? It played in my ears, and so I'm hoping it played on your end. But unlike the intro video, it played? Okay, sweet. Unlike the intro video, which I can see the sound playing on the screen, I don't see the sound from the transition thing. But yeah, that is literally everything for regeneration. Oh, crap. I forgot to... okay, so what I need to do... so here is the document I made with everything surrounding regeneration, all the links, and I even screenshotted the more important parts from the different bits. I need to screenshot and put the link to the first jump point that I read, and I'll add that in here. And this is a link to the jump point stored on my Google Drive. And what I will do is, if you didn't catch all this, it will be up on my YouTube in the next couple days. I'll post it. If you don't want to listen to me talk for 3.5 hours and you want to read, this link will be in the description below in the on the YouTube video, and you'll have all the links to all the articles, as well as you'll have the link to the jump points on my Google Drive if you are not a subscriber and don't have access. That way you can reference them at your leisure. You can read them on your own, as well as listen to the sultry sound of my voice. Good night, Danger Hobo. Good to see you, buddy. Thanks for coming and hanging out again. But yeah, so I will make all this available to you. So that way, if you missed it or you want to refer back to it or you have other questions, it's there. And of course, if you ever want to talk about this stuff, if you ever have thoughts on it, I'd love to hear them. My Discord is always open. There's a link on my YouTube and on my Twitch to my Discord. It's an open invite for all of you. We'd love to have you. That's it for tonight's episode of Lore Equals Gameplay about the lore surrounding Regeneration, especially in the greater context of Death of a Spaceman. Let's go ahead and raid somebody. The link to this thing here, I will put the link to it. Anyone with the link, viewer, copy link. I'm going to put the link in the chat right now, but I will update it so that way I have to put that other jump point in here. I'll upload it to my drive. I'll do a screenshot, but I'll put the link to it in here as well for you. Here, link. My gift to all of you. I do all the research and find all the citations, so you don't have to. But yeah, before we go, since there's still looks like 40 something of you, 45 of you guys still hanging out in chat, it is always good to pay it forward and send some love to another streamer, especially since Red Monster SC rated us and sent so many of you my way. Thanks again to Red Monster SC. Love you, buddy. Hope you had a good stream. And thank you so much to the members of his community who have stuck around and hung out with me and followed the channel. I hope you found the information interesting, and I hope you'll join me again sometime. We will, it looks like we're probably going to be doing the next Pathfinders podcast on Tuesday. And on Tuesday, we'll be covering the Roadmap Roundup with their edition of 4.0. We may, I don't know if we're going to beat this dead horse on all the medical gameplay and the nurses stuff, but we're definitely going to cover the roadmap. So stay tuned for that. Should be the same bat time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, right here on my channel. But I always put out the announcement on Twitter and it is a event in my Discord. But let's find someone to raid. Do we have any suggestions on who to raid? I always like to take suggestions from the chat. Streamers that you feel would are worthy of a raid. Let's see, and let's see. Let's how do you spell it again? I've rated them before. Ost. Let's see. Usttc. I must be spelling it wrong because I'm not.
Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship.
Oh, Zonte, thank you so much for the follow. I try not to raid Uber J Bay Bay. Okay, are they Burke's brother? Okay. J Bay Bay. I don't know them, but we will raid them. And the title for their stream says, "Yes, I know my brother is playing with Summit and Stroud." Okay, we'll raid them. All right, thanks again so much, everybody. Thanks for the love and support. Thanks for hanging out with me this evening. This was a lot of fun. I hope you guys found it interesting, and have a great night. Cheers. Goodbye.